31,822,025,098,609. F. Library, University of California, San Diego. 770C, asterisk Roman 20. Page 4, 31,822,025,098,609. The Boyce Book of Model Aeroplanes. Page 6. Page 7. Launching the Airship. The Boyce Book of Model Aeroplanes, How to Build and Fly Them. With the story of the evolution of the flying machine by Francis A. Collins, illustrated with many photographs and diagrams by Thuther, New York, The Century, 1910 Co. Copyright 1910 by The Century Co. Published October, Zekio, electrotyped and printed by C. H. Simmons & Co., Boston. To Arnold Miller Collins, aged 10, than whom no collaborator could have been more enthusiastic. Page 12. Contents Part I. Models, How to Build and Fly Them. Chapter Page I. Then who sport 4 boys. 3 Roman 2. Why the Aeroplane flies. 18 Roman 3. How to build a glider. 30 Roman 4. Building the motor. 50 V. Fine points off construction. 68 VI. Simple monoplane models. 84 Roman 7. Elaborating the monoplane. 102 Roman 8. Building abiplane. 121 Roman 9. Binding monoplane endoplane forms. 137X. Faults and how to mend them. 143 Part Roman 2. The History and Science of Aviation I. The First Flying Machines. 163 Roman 2. Developing the Aeroplane. 175 Roman 3. The Wright brothers' own story. 193 Roman 4. Aboard the Wright's airship. 224 V. Other airplanes appear. 238 VI. Successful monoplanes. 254 Roman 7. Aerial warfare. 272 Roman 8. Sports off-the-air aeroplanes. 293 Roman 7. Page 14. List of illustrations. Page launching the airship. Frontispiece, a junior aero club with its instructor in one off the New York public school. 7. A young inventor in his workshop. 14. Boys comparing models. 14. The first glider weighted at half front. 28. Dowel strips of different sizes. 33. Plated diagrams of plan of aeroplane on page 5838. A coil-off cane, or read 42. Splitting a bamboo fishbowl. 47. Plate B, the propeller before cutting down. 51. Model constructed from diagram, plate A. 58. Splitting the Seger box cover to build the propeller. 63. Plate C, the diagram of a monoplane. 65. A model aeroplane built from the drawing, plate C. 71. Detail of rudder and propeller of model built from drawing, plate C. 78. Plate IA, clever folding model. The wings are broader than need be. 88. Plate IIA, model aeroplane worth imitating. 93. Plate III, an ingenious French model made of umbrella wire. 100. List of illustrations. Page plate XXA, cellular type, with rudder and elevating plane. 213. Plate XZ, a complicated model, capable of long flights. 220. Plate Roman 22, an interesting form which flies backward or forward. 225. Plate Roman 23, a well-built model badly proportioned. 230. Plate Roman 20, for a Wright model ready for flight. 235. Plate Roman 25, another view off Wright model. 246. Plate Roman 26, an ingenious model which rises quickly. 251. Plate Roman 27, an aeroplane with paper wings. 255. A very simple monoplane for beginners. 262. Otto Lilienthal about to take flight. 267. A machine for testing the lifting power of aeroplanes. 274. Maxims, first aeroplane. 280. The machine on the rails. A SID appeared in 1893. 281st. Flight off Wright brothers' first motor machine. 285. Three-quarter view OFA flight at Sim Station, November 16. 1904. 292. Front view off flight off Wright aeroplane, October 4. 1905. 297. Page 18. Part I. Models, How to Build and Fly Them. Page 20. Boyce Book of Model Aeroplanes. Chapter I. The Newsport 4 Boys I in the Boys Calendar. Nowadays the aeroplane season comes in with sled dingendruns all through skating, marble, top, kite flying, and bicycle time. The delights Ophelfield games seem tobe found in this marvelous Nudoi. The fun in throwing adap cannot compare with that of launching an aeroplane, while kite flying gis every poor substitute for the actual conquest off the air. Watch one off these fascinating little ships off the air, which you have fashioned and built with your own hands, actually rise from the earth and soar aloft with a swallow's 3. Model aeroplane's swiftness is perhaps the greatest boy's sport in the world. Certainly none you game or toy haste verdict and such hold of the boy's imagination, and in so short a time enrolled such an army of enthusiasts. Throughout the country today upward often 1,000 boy aviators aerostruggling with the problem off the airship. Among these junior aeronauts there cord for height and that for distance in flying aeromatters off quite as lively interest as among the grown-ups. Great contests of aviators here and abroad are watched with intelligent interest. Let a new form off aeroplane, abiplane or monoplane appear, and it is quickly reproduced by scores off models in its virtues putto an actual test. If ein wing or nuplan for enduring stability is invented, a new thought in the steering device, or some new application of power, it is instantly the subject of farness discussion among the junior aeronauts the country over. Nor are junior aeronauts merely imitators. The mystery of the problems of the four. The Newsport four boys air, the fascination of ein world of conquest, make a strong appeal to the aimer icon temperament. With thousands of bright boys working with might and main to build airships which will actually fly, there is certain to real progress. Thou sands of different models have been designed and potential test. This army of inventors ranging in age from 12 to 18 years, some of whom will theviators of the future, cannot fill todo great service as time goes on. In theactual conquest off the air. Within a few months this army of inventors has become organized into clubs, and their regular program of tournaments has been arranged. The junior aero clubs are found in connection with many schools, both public and private. They are made features of Young Men's Christian Association amusements, Orthobecum identified with various neighborhoods. Tournaments are arranged between clubs of different cities or states. While an international tournament Icevin planned 5 model aeroplanes between the United States and Great Britain. The Junararo world has its prizes, which are scarcer less coveted than the rewards for actual flight. Some 5-timed Alshave being distributed this year among the members of New York Junior Aero Club. Many elaborate trophies will contended for during 1910 by the junior aeronauts of the country. A handsome silver cube of special design has been presented by Mr. A. E.O. Stevens and Asik on B. Mr. Sidney Bowman, while similar trophies are offered by Commodore Marshall O. Chanute and others. The toy airplanes not limited Tony one season, a sewn sled, kite, or skates. In the winter months, theatist off-light may be carried out in a larger room or hall. There is an advantage in holding such atmonet in a large schoolroom, riding academy, or armory, since there isn't a baffling wind to contend with. Already definite rules have been laid down for conducting these tests and for making 6. Page 25, page 26, Newsport 4 Boys official records off-lights. It is possible, therefore, to compare their chords made in different cities or countries with only another. The junior aero tournaments are likely to be the most thrilling experience in a boy's life. The feats which the world has watched with such breathless interest at aviation meets at Rhymes, Pau, or Los Angeles are reproduced in miniature in these boys' contests witut loss of enthusiasm. Weeks or months of preparation in scores of little workshops are no put on actual test. The model airship, which has cost so many anxious and lightful hours in the building, is to spread its wings with scores of similar aircraft. The superiority of the monoplane or biplane forms is tested without fear of favor. For the young inventors, even for the Marylaymen in such matters, the scene is extremely animated. One hand one sees the inventors tuning up their aircraft for the final test. Their Aerolively Discus 9 model aeroplanes asterisk sions in progress over the marvelous little toys. The layman hears anal language spoken with perfect confidence about him. The boys have already made the picturesque vocabulary of the world of aviation their own. The discussion ranges over monoplanes and biplanes, cellular types, and flexed planes, or a frigid and lateral braces. O hear a crowd off these enthusiasts shout their comments as the airships fly about is in itself education in advanced aeronautics. Directly the floor is cleared, the judges take their position, and the junior sky pilot toes the mark, airship in hand. 1, 2, 3 / shout the starter, and with a weird the graceful aircraft is launched. The flutter off the tinner propeller suggests the sudden rise off a covey of partridges. The little craft, a tone so graceful and frail, defies all the accepted laws of gravitation. It darts ahead in long, undulating curves as it floats over thin visible air currents. As in the aeroplanes of larger size, the length of 10. The Newsport 4 Boys flight is dependent almost wholly on the motive power. As little engine slows down, the craft wavers, and then in a long curve, for it can do nothing ungraceful, it glides towards, skidding along the floor like aberd reluctant Tolev Theski. When the time comes forth the races between the aircraft, enthusiasm runs high. Naturally, these contests are the most popular features of the tournament. A line of inventors with their aircraft, usually 6 at a time. Their positions at start in line. Each aircraft has been tuned to its highest powers. The labor off weeks, the study off aircraft problems, the labo ration off bit inventive schemes, error represented in the shining model. And the problem before the young inventors is most baffling. There are a few models to work from, the science is still so young, and the inventor may well feel himself something of a Columbus in launching his frail craft upon this uncharted sea. Signal half a dozen propellers are instantly released. A whirring a new Roman 2 model aeroplanes mirable light wings fills the air. The curious flock of mechanical birds rise and falls, dipping in long graceful curves as they struggle toward the goal. Some graceful little craft perfectly reproducing to the last detail the famous right maw chine shoulders, along beside a glistening monoplane which resembles Agrathok with wings outspread. The next craft is perhaps a complicated arrangement of plaintive norgestured type. While the craft made familiar by the photographs of the famous aviators reproduced. The thrill of an aeroplane race is a sensation peculiarly its own. It seems so astonishing that the graceful little craft should remain aloft at all that the area never failing delight to the eye. The varying fortunes off the race, the tempo rar ladgain biome craft, tobe lost the next moment to another, which a second later itself falls behind. And the final heat between the survivors in the race as they approach the goal, enough to drive the average boy crazy with delight. 12. Page 31. A young inventor in his workshop, boys comparing models. A Newsport 4 boys the rules for these contests are rigidly observed. Each aircraft is sent aloft by its inventor or owner. The start must be made from Amar, and of course each aeroplane must tow the mark. There must be 3 judges for each event. One stands at his starting line and givest word off command for the start off the race or flight, as the case may be. A second judge stands midway down the course, and the third at or near the finishing line. The king aviator winds up his craft, adjusts the power with his own hands, and sets the rudder for the flight. The miniature aircraft must act in flight exactly the same as the great working aircraft which carry men aloft. Adoy airship must make its flight in a horizontal position, and if it ends over in flight, even though it flies farther and faster than any other, it is disqualified. The craft must also fly in a reasonably straight line toward the goal, and should it be deflected for a near an anguf at a tangent, the flight, no matter how successful otherwise, 15 model aeroplanes will not be counted. In case of a collision between aircraft, the race is repeated. The responsibility for adjusting the power, arranging the steering gear, and giving direction to the flight at the start is entirely in the hands of the engineer himself. In measuring the length of the flights, again, the point at which the airship first touches the ground is fixed arbitrarily as themed. Often the little craft merely grazes the ground to rise and skid for many feet. In the official count, this secondary flight is not considered. First and last, none but the owner of little craft is permitted to touch it. The grace with which ship lands is also taken into consideration in granting the prizes. Each boy is permitted 3 trials. As in their gular aviation world, these records rarely stand for more than a few days at a time. These airships are driven by ropes of rubber bands which are turned on themselves until the are tightly knotted. When 16. The Newsport 4 boys in and winding, they serve to drive the propeller around some hundreds of times. The rubber is a light that it adds little to weight off the craft. The motor is of course a makeshift, and at best only serves to keep the propeller in motion for a fraction of a minute. Experiments have been made in driving the propeller with compressed air, which is carried in an aluminium rod fastened beneath the planes. The force of thousands of youthful inventive geniuses ascertain to bring forth some new motive power. It is characteristic of the American boy theater aviators should feel themselves disgraced to fly a model not of their own make. A Cersalt, miniature craft of amazing ingenuity and workmanship are being turned out by the mature aviators all over the country. The materials employed, such as rattan, bamboo, or light lath, and the silk for covering the planes, or the wires for bracing the frame, cost but a few pennies. Toy aviation isonoff most democratic off sports. 17. The Roman 2 with the Aeroplane flies th aviator must venture in his frail craft upon an unknown and uncharted sea. The great problem is to ride the shifting air currents and keep thema chine right side up. Although we cannot see the air currents, when that they are constantly ebbing and flowing, piling themselves in great heaps, or slipping away in giddy vortices. There is much beautiful scenery, high mountain peaks, deep valleys, level plains formed by these ever-shifting air currents through which the aviator must steer his course blindly as best they may. A great bank of whirling clouds driven before Thewend shows how raw and tumbling he must navigate. The air being a much thinner medium 18. The aeroplane flies thanwider is, of course, far more unstable and baffling. Its supporting power is not only very small but constant liveries. The flying machine which will navigate successful in a perfectly quiet atmosphere may be seaworthy or other unairworthy when a wind springs up, or the shifting off Thewend may spoil the pilot's plans. Towed to his troubles, the aviator must move among air currents which change again in a moment's time. So as study the difficult types of navigation, we will appreciate, more than ever, the wonderful patience, skill, and daring of the successful aviators. Diction off the air currents had first Tobe carefully studied before flight became possible, although theorists invisible when know exactly how the air currents act upon thewings or planes. When a plane's surface, such as thewing off an aeroplane, moves horizontally through air, the air is caught for a moment underneath it and is pressed down slightly, and a moment later slips out again from under 19. Model aeroplanes the other edge set the side sandbag. It is thighs air under pressure which yields a slight support. It has been proven by many experiments that the supporting power varies with the shape of the plane or surface driven horizontally through air. A long narrow surface driven sideways gains much more support from the earth than the same area in the form of a square or any other shape. In other words, square surface 10 feet square containing 100 square feet will not travel as ferrosasser face 20 feet long and 5 feet wide. The explanation is very simple. A square surface moves along, the air is momentarily compressed under the front edge, but instantly slips off at the back and sides. As the broad surface off the rectangular plane cuts the air, however, few off the air currents canescape at the sides, while most off them are crowded together and held in place until they slip off at the back. The supporting power of the plane is therefore indirect proportion 20. The aeroplane flies to the length off the front, or, as it is called, thentering edge off the plane. Here I find down off the secrets off flight off birds. The spread between the tips off their outstretched wings is much greater than thewith off the wings themselves. It also explains why the right model, for instance, should be suitably shaped and should move sideways like a crab. If he ousted the models off the successful monoplanes with this in mind, they have a no meaning. Allow off the proportion off the entering edges free important in designing an aeroplane. It is so important for the Aerobook can find as long as possible beneath the gliding plane that many devices have been tried to hold it. Some planes are built with a slight edge running around the sides and back, on the under surface, to hem in the air. Some off the biplanes are built with closed sides, the cellular form they are called toe-kept from slip pingaway. The box kite is constructed with this in view. The builder off Model 21. Model aeroplanes will find, however, that the slight edge formed by turning the cloth over the frame off the plane is sufficient to hold the air. The flight off a kite, by the way, appears a very simple matter once this law is understood. The air currents strike the kite at an angle and are deflected or karam off a lithosama angle. A line is drawn through the middle off this angle, exactly bisecting it, will give you the direction of the force exerted by Thewin. Meanwhile, the kite string holds the plane rig idly in position. As the kite darts from side to side, it is merely obeying this law and adjusting itself so that its surface will stand at right angles to the thrust off the wind. An airplane is simply a kite which makes its own wind or air currents. The kite is, of course, balanced against Thewin currents and kept more or less stable by its cord. An aeroplane must balance itself. The secret of ensuring stability was discovered only after years of experience with gliders and actual flights. 22. If the aeroplane flies, the stability of the aeroplane depends upon the proper adjustment of the pressure of the air on the machine. There is, of course, a center of pressure, just as there is a center of gravity on an aeroplane of whatever form or size. It may be laid down a sage general rule that a plane traveling horizontally in aqueous atmos is kept horizontal and stable by making the centers of pressure and gravity coincide. The air currents, as Swept pointed out, never entirely attribute are constantly tilting the plane about. Hold a sheet of stiff paper horizontally and let it fall. It will flutter to the ground or perhaps be twirled away, indicating the presence of a number of unexpected air currents. The aeroplane, which would remain stable in a perfectly quiet atmosphere, must overcome all these twists and turns. The problem of stability has not yet, of course, been solved. Having reached this stage in the evolution of the aeroplane, the aviator next began to experiment by bending his 23 model aeroplane's wings or planes and throwing out lateral or stability planes to help him keep his balance. It was no found that every little tilt engulfed the planes upward or downward would serve to right the machine when it leaned over. The secret, like so many others, was gained by watching the flights off birds. You have perhaps seen a great albatross or seagull soar without the slightest effort and apparently without motion. Look more closely and you will see that the tips off the broad wings move slightly from time to time, while the main body off the wings remains rigid, which is the great secret of stability ability. Things off the planes were next made flexible, very slightly so, and arranged so that they might be moved up and down or flexed at will. The flights made with this adjustment were at once brought under control. New planes were added before and behind, and it was found that the machine could be kept from darting up and down just as well as tilting over at head 24. The aeroplane flies ends. The aeroplane was no ready for the installation of the motor. The bis curve forthewing off an aeroplane is an irregular curve drawn above the horizontal line. It is not a perfect arc off a circle but reaches its greatest height about 1/3 back off the front edge, with their off the line slightly flattened. It is much the same lineasis formed by some waves just before they break. The plane thus shaped is driven with the blunt orienting edge forward or against the wind. Building the large aeroplanes, this curve is worked out with great accuracy, but the builder of model airships may carry the line in high side. As the air strikes the entering edge of this surface, it is driven underneath and held there for a moment before it canes cape from beneath the shallow. Thus support off the air is therefore greater than in the case of a flat plane, or in fact, any other form. The air which passes over the top of the entering edge, meanwhile, glides or slips off at a slight upward angle. Thus 25 model aeroplanes forming a partial vacuum over the greater part of the upper surface. This vacuum, in turn, tends to topple the planes slightly upward, thus acting in the same direction as the air which is compressed beneath it. The planes thus constructed are, besides, much more easily controlled than those of any other shape. When thin turring edge off thighs planes raised, the pressure off air beneath is increased and the pull off the partial vacuum combines with it to make it rise. Difficult problem off getting the aeroplane aloft was largely solved by this curve. Once aloft, such an airship answers hurl much better than any other form. This curve is accountable for many of the movements off airplanes which seem so mysterious to the mere layman. When an airplane turns, its outer end rises, and the more rapid is its flight, the greater is this tilt. It must be remembered that end is moving more rapidly and the increased speed causes the plane to lift. Many photographs off airplanes show 26, page 45, page 46. The aeroplane flies them balanced at precarious angles while macking at. If the plane is tilted too high, the air current slip out from beneath, no vacuum is developed above, and equiloses speed. On the other hand, if it be inclined downward, it soon loses the supporting power off the air and plunges down. Every stage off this development, the aviators are indebted to the bird's foreign formation. The successful aeroplanes have great width compared to their depth. They gain stability by flexing the tips off thewings, and their planes areached upward and forward exactly as thewings off a bird. The aviator arranges his center off gravity after the same general model, below the planes and will forward. He places his engine forward, just as the bird has its strongest muscles in the chest, and builds his frame off hollow tubes like the bones off a bird. 29. After Roman 3, th simplest form of heavier than air machine is the stiff guard or litter, which yow may spin across the room. If yow gavages the right whirl, it will glide o'nail will form a knife it. There are many ways besides offfolding a sheet off stiff paper, which will convert it into a pressing glicklever little airship. With a little practice, the gliders may be made tougly 10 or 20 times their own length, which would be very creditable flight for the best aeroplane models. There is no way to obtain thick instruction off a model aeroplane than be study and experiment with these paper ships. The most famous aeronauts of the day, the Wright brothers, Curtiss, Ring, and many others, have spent years 30 how to build a glider, working with gliders before attempting to build or fly an airplane. It is in this way that they discovered what form off-wing would support the greatest weight, whether the passenger should stand up or lee down, how to place the propeller and rudder, and hundreds of other details which have made possible theactual conquests off the air. Following in their footsteps, or rather their flights, mature aeronauts should first build and fly in gliders or aeroplanes without means of self-propulsion. The simplest form of glider may be made by cutting a broad oval from a sheet of stiff litter paper and creasing it down the middle. The experiment may be made more interesting, however, by cutting out the plane like the stretched wings of a bird, as suggested in the accompanying illustration. Try as yow may, this sheet will not fly. Now add a trifling weight to the front off the plane. This may be done by fastening one or more paper clips to thege, pasting a match or toothpick. 31. Model aeroplanes or be dropping a little tallow or sealing wax. At first yow will underestimate the weight your little airship will carry. Add more. Wait in the same way and test its gliding power until the little airship will glide gracefully across the floor. Keep the length of these models under 6 inches. If you increase it beyond this, the model loses steadiness and flutters about ineffectively. An interesting model may be made by folding a sheet of stiff paper in an arrow-like form. Idea is to form a series of planes which will support the weight of the tinnicraft, and at a time, enable it to fly or dart in a straight line. It will be found that the vertical surfaces lend stability and keep the ship moving in a straight line. You will soon learn in this way more of the principles of airplane construction than mere reading from books can't EQ. Be careful, meanwhile, to remember just thou yow have launched the various forms of models. 32. Dowel strips of different sizes. Page 52. How to build a glider, whether yow have thrown them with an upward or downward motion, and how hard a push yow have given them. The skilly walkwire in this way will be valuable later on when yow come to launch your regular model aeroplane. Wherein or did obtain the construct on off the frames of airplane models. The first model will be merely a glider. The frame and wings or planes off an aeroplane are built much the same as Sakai. The idea in all such work is to combine the greatest possible strength or stability with extreme lightness. Remember, however, that the aeroplane during its flights is racked and shaken by its motor, and is likely to land with a bump. The materials used must be stronger than in the case of an ordinary kite, that joints more securely formed, and the entire structure braced in every possible way. The best materials for constructing these gliders or airplanes are very cheap and easily obtained. At almost any hardware store you will find a variety of 35 model aeroplanes dowel sticks, which seem especially made for this work. They are smooth, round sticks a yard in length and a fava reedy off diameter. The sticks 3/16 of an inch in diameter will be found most serviceable, while the larger sticks are just the thing for the backbones off your aeroplane. These sticks will not split at things and may readily work. They cost $0.01 a piece. Some boys find that their red or cane suits their purpose better than the dowel sticks, since it is more flexible and a trifle lighter. The cane ICC tow work when you wish to build planes with curved lines, It can be readily shaped tonide sired form befirst with ingetandaloing gitto dry afterworking. Care must beta can in using it, since thenes are like split. Bundles off this cane may be bought at most hardware stores or in department stores. Enough material for constructing amida may be bought for efficiency. The lightest offal available materials is bamboo. It is difficult to procure. How 36. How to build a glider. Care must beta can toe have the sides off, rectangle exactly the same length and joints closely and neatly finished. Some boys prefer lay-on stick over another. Then wrap that joint tightly with thin but strong linen thread, and over this brush a coat off thin glue without using enabrads or nails. In kite building, tobjer, it would be enough to lay the strips over one another and festoon roughly with adak. Nor did the lengths off the stick, when covered with paper, make much if any difference. The aeroplane, it must be remembered, travels edgewise, and having no guiding string, is at the mercy of free gust off wind. If the frames are carelessly proportionate, it will not travel true, but is like little bed flected. Imagine a boat whose sides are no exactly uniform trying to travel in a straight line. It would be lopsided, and would roll and pitch under the most favorable conditions. Now an aeroplane, since it revels in south and medium air, is far more sensitive than a boat, and it becomes 39. Model aeroplanes lopside if its proportions bain't the least inaccurate. Only the greatest care in construction will produce an aircraft which will fly true and straight. It makes little or no difference in a kite if thene's project length joints be carelessly made. Not only must your aeroplane be perfectly proportioned, but it must be finished like a piece of fine furniture. Texture or friction is a very important one in the heavier than air chine. How cannot be too careful to round off every corner and smooth every exposed surface. If you have opportunity to see a regular aeroplane, a Wright or Curtiss model, you will find that every part of the machine has been sandpapered and varnished with the greatest care. This is not done for the sake of appearances, but cause it has been found that thewin striking against the rough piece of wood meets an appreciable amount of resistance, whereas it slips past Apple's surface with little or no friction. Your aeroplane should be finished like a violin. 40. Page 57. Page 58. How to build a glider. In building these planes, be careful to compare the lengths off the corresponding sides throughout. If you prefer taus brads for festoning thread joints, do so. The dowel stick and bamboo will take the brads with little danger of splitting. When thoroughly dry, cute away the glue which has squeezed out round off the ends, and sandpaper with fine sand or emery paper. If you use brads, it will not be necessary to place the joints and navis while drying, should your strips split, or the holes with a finial. Some boys, after drilling the holes, merrily glue the sticks together, using nails whatever. Now cut 3 dowel strips 34 inches long and slightly sharpen their ends, so that when brought together they will form a prism whose base is about 1/4 their length. Next, bend a strong piece off wire and tow hook a hair pinwheel swerve for small models and festoon it in thepex off the prism, with the hook inside. The projecting end of wire should 43. Model aeroplanes then be bent over, and the 3 dowel sticks glued and tied tightly together. At he opened off the prism, next fasten 2 strips from end toned, leaving third side off the triangle open. Now fasten your planes on the up and city off the prism, slightly mortising the sticks and gluing and nailing them securely in position. To further strengthen prism, joint the 3 sides at hemidal with 3 sticks, forming a complete triangle. Prism thus braced will found a strong as a heavy central stick, besides being much lighter and providing excellent base for the propeller. A strong stick about 1/2 inch square should be glued across the middle of the triangle the base off the prism to support the motor. The frame once complete, sandpapered and varnished, it is ready to be covered. At first this may be done with some smooth paper. Almost any thin material, muslin or linen, will answer for the purpose, although white silk makes the most. 44. How to build a glider finished looking model. Such scraps as may be found in the family piece bag will answer every purpose. In sewing the cloth over the frame, thedvice off some big sister, aunt, or the mother may well beta can. The idea is to fasten the cloth smoothly and neatly over the frame, keeping the surface free from creases or enclaves of any kind. Boys are likely to be awkward with the needle. The cloth may also be glued over the frames. Complete cover the planes with Athens solution of paraffin dissolved in benzene. In attaching the planes or wings to the central axis of the model, the larger stick or backbone may be mortised neatly, so that the sides of the frame will be sunk in flush with the upper surface. A fairly good glider may be made, however, by merely nailing down the frames against this backbone. The distance between the two planes is a complicated problem, but the beginner had better at first imitate the model shown in the companion illustration. If that was supporting planes, B45. Model aeroplanes too far apart or too near together, the glider will fall. The mature must experiment by changing their position on central axis until it's the right proportion. He will be later talkerith his proportion in high side, and the experience will prove invaluable. Until you have hit up in the proper position, fasten them to the backbone with rubber bands. These permit you to slide the planes back and forth without the trouble of nailing. Aeroplanes, unlike kites, fly best in a perfectly quiet atmosphere. If y'all make your trial flights out outdoors, select a quiet day. A room, a barn, or an large interior will be found better. In launch in gyre glider, hold it from beneath so that it balances and throw it forward with a swift, steady movement off there. A little practice will make you expert. You will know find yourself fitted tour produce any off the simpler forms of monoplane models, several of which are here illustrated. An interesting model is made by attaching U-shaped wingstow central 46, splitting a bamboo fishpole, page 64, how to build a glider axis. In making these curved planes, the reed will be found useful. Other effective gliders are made with triangular wings fixed at a variety of angles. Remember that the model must be absolutely symmetrical. In attaching the frame's central axis, always make the joints as smooth and rigid as possible. Thuating off the glider will be found to be very important detail. As a rule, the gliders require a considerable weight at front. The exact position of thuate can live determined by experiment. The simplest way is to wire a nail or a piece of metal to off the frame. If your glider doesn't balance perfectly, which is likely to be the case, this fault can be largely remedied by weighting git. The tendency off the glider is likely to upward, and thuate serves to keep it on even keel. When your model glides steadily through the air without rolling or pitching, you have constructed all-balanced frame. It will then be time to take up the problem of propulsion. 49. Roman 4 building the motor all-constructed glider alone makes a fascinating toy, but once the motor has been installed it seems almost alive. Your little craft will know better for new conquests. It will imitate the flights of the famous aviators, contending with the same problems, perhaps meeting similar accidents. The motor is the most interesting, as it is the most important detail of the aeroplane. Although it is possible to buy propellers for the motor, it is advisable that the boy should work out this problem for himself. An effective motor is easy to build and costs practically nothing. The length of your propeller blades should be equal to about 1/3 the width of your largest plane. For this building the motor will need 6 strips of some light wood, such as pine or ash, although a cigar box wood, if the grain be straight, will answer. Cut the strips to measure about 1/2 inch in width and 1/8 inch thick. See Plate B. The propeller before cutting down. Plate B. The strips should be covered with athen glue and laid on upon another, and a very thin nail be carefully driven through the little pilly the exact center between the wounds, while the glue is still soft. Turn the sticks on the axis formed by the nail, so that they make a double fan, spacing the outer edges about 1/4 of an inch apart. Be certain that the fan is regular, and then give the nail a final rap to tighten it hold and keep all the glued surfaces together, and set away. Model aeroplanes tawdry. If you can prop up things, it will be better top you to flat iron or other weight 1 inch to make the strips glued together tighter. The thrust or propelling power depends as much up in the curves off the propeller as up on the force with which the motor is driven. If the propeller be too flat, it will not hold off the air, while if the pitch or angle off the curve be too sharp, it will simply bore holes in the air and create a vacuum, which is useless. The pitch should be about 1 in 12. That is, if the propeller blade be 12 inches long, the curve should be 1 inch high. When the glue is thoroughly dry and hard, the projecting step-like edge may be cut away. A flat chisel or an ordinary pen knife will do the work. Be careful to keep things uniform, since so much depends upon the balance. Cute away with wood until the blades areonate off an inch or less in thickness, and round off the corners. The propeller should then be sandpapered perfectly smooth, and var 52. Building the motor nished. You will be delighted to find how professional and ship-shape the finished propeller will be. Now carefully remove the nail fastening the pieces, and you will find, of course, that it marks the exact center and forms a perfect axis. Should you need tone largeth's hole, don't attempt to bore it, since this may split wood, but burn it out using an nail heated over August flame. Now insert a stiff wire in this hole, a hat pin will answer, and fasten it be clenching it at the back tight of the propeller, and fill up the hole with glue. The photographs of the propellers of various models will give you one excellent idea of the proper curve. Aviators differ as to the proper position for the propellers in toy airplanes. Here is a problem you must work out for yourself. Some believe that the propeller placed in front of the planes gets a firmer grip on the air. Since the propeller is at the stern, the planes make manities turbine currents. Just as SAS Steamship 53 model aeroplanes churns the water in its walk. Others are gethet biplasing this propelling force at her rear off the planes, the craft is made more steady. At any rate, excellent flights may be made with either arrangement. In connecting up your propeller with the motor, it is very important that the shaft should turn freely and that the bearings offer the least possible resistance. If you have built your aeroplane from the drawing, see Plate A. Now drill a hole exactly in the center of the stick, which crosses the triangulate the rear off the frame. This hole will come only with the pex off the prism, or exactly in the center of the triangle. When the turning off the motor pulls things off frame together, the strain will therefore be exactly distributed among the 3 sides or braces. The propeller must be kept clear off the frame and must never touch or scrape against it. First, strip off metal, drilled todek thixlior hat pin. Should 54, building motor benailed over the hole in thecross piece. Ashid of aluminium such as sisust for name plates is just the thing. No on the propeller wire or axis string a smooth, symmetrical glass bead, and pass thixel through metal stripantha crosspiece. This will give one excellent substitute for ball bearings. Themed off the wire should then be turned into a hook well inside the frame. The propeller should be mounted so carefully that it will turn freely without friction and without wobbling from side to side. The simplest and most effective motor is formed by connecting the two hooks with many turns off a long, thin strand of rubber, which can be bought by the yard or pound. The thinner strands off rubber will exert more force than the heavy bands, and your rubber is more durable than any other. The bands should be looped loosely between the two hooks, just as how would wind asking of Zephyr over the hook on the propeller shaft. Then around the hook at the author 55. Model aeroplane's end, then down over the propeller shaft hook, and soon. If the hooks be 3 feet apart, the combined strands should form a band 1 inch or more in diameter. If you cannot buy the rubber in this form, a number of 2-inch rubber bands, such as you buy the box at the stationers, may be lopped chain fashion together to form a continuous rope from hook to hook. To store rope energy for the flight. Simply turn your propeller round and round until the rope off rubber bands is tightly knotted. You can read a little when it is sufficiently wound and the dinger point is reached, which comes when the pull-off rubber grows too strong for your frame. The average motor should be turned about 150 times. When the propeller is released, the rubber bands in unwinding will give out back almost exactly the same number of revolutions, less perhaps 1 ortwo, which represents the loss through friction. If the propeller simply buzzes around, coming torced in a fuskin without 56. Page 73. Model constructed from diagram, plate A. Building the motor raising your aeroplane. It is probably too small for you off the aeroplane. When fully wound up, the propeller should run for about 10 seconds. On the other hand, if the propeller be too large, it will quickly twist the aeroplane out off its course and drive it away. It is well to try your motor thoroughly to make sure off it's running smoothly before attempting any actual flights. Donatil toth temptation off-dreeing your wings, however, until the skids have been attached. Most off the regular full-size aeroplanes run on ordinary bicycle wheels, although the Wrights use runners like a sleigh. These skids or runners enable the machine to run along the ground with the least possible friction and greatly assist in rising. In the models of aeroplanes, the skids serve a double purpose in protecting the machine when it alights. A serviceable skid may be made by building a triangle off thin strips and attacking your the frame with the broadside downward. As shown in the company 59. Model aeroplanes in drawing. Skids made off-read curving down from the main body of the aeroplane will also serve to take up the shock. There are many ways of constructing these skids, and a study of the models here illustrated will give any suggestions. If you intend to have your aeroplane start from the ground, the front skids should be somewhat longer than those in there are to give a the proper lift. The friction off the skids is greatly reduced by mounting theman wheels. Small metal wheels may be borrowed from toy automobiles, or small discs off wood or cork will answer for the purpose. A very simple axis may be formed by running a long hat pin through uprights off skids. The photographs off the best models will be found full of suggestions. You will need at least 3 skids to form atropod for your aeroplane. It makes little difference if you use only in front, ortwo. It is very important that the frame should be properly braced to withstand 60. Building the motor this strain brought up in it. In the glider this brasingus less important, but the tion off the motor changes the situation. The rapid movement off the propellers racks the entire frame, and the impact on landing is naturally greater when the weight is increased. I think upper wire, no, 32, 34, or 36 should boost, which will be found strong and flexible, while adding little to it. After constructing your aeroplane, goover it carefully and cute away through it wherever it may be lightened, and then strengthen it by bracing. Wherever adjoint may be strengthened or a strut or a plane be made more rigid by bracing, done it spare the wire. The accompanying drawing with the photographs off models will indicate how these braces may be speedlead. Tobgen with braces should be run, wherever possible, from the corners off the plane's to the central frame and the skids. In the monoplane forms you will find it worth, while to add posts or perpendiculars, to 61. Model aeroplanes city off the frame and run wire braces diagonalithines off the planes. The extreme ends off the planes should also be connected. No matter how carefully you have constructed your aeroplane, you will find the planes have 8 indensitas again become wrinkled. These braces give you the opportunity to topple them, taut and hold them in this position. This is commonly tuning up the aeroplane. Will found convenient toughest and small ringstow thenes off the braces whenever they may be slipped over thenes off the frame to save the trouble of winding. The more perfectly your aeroplane is tuned up, the greater will be speed and distance qualities. Excellent monoplane fourthibigin nur is shown in drawing. Plate C. It is very simple and easily adjusted, and when well tuned up will fly upward off 200 feet. The two planes are built separately in the proportion indicated. The frame consists of a central 62, splitting the cigar box cover to build the propeller. Page 80, building the motor stick supported by triangular skids. An ordinary hat pin run through the supports near the ground serves as an axle for wooden discs or wheels. The front skids are made somewhat higher to give the front planes the proper angle of elevation. The diagram of a monoplane. Planes measure 20 inches by 8 inches. The motor base is 36 inches in length. Plate C. The bracing off the plane is simple but effective and should be copied carefully, particularly the double bracing in the rear, using ordinary wire for the purpose. A double support assust fourth axle off the propeller, excellent idea, which keeps the shaft rigidly in place. It is formed by fastening two blocks drilled to hold the axle to the bottom off the main frame. The planes are held by wires running from 65. Model aeroplanes the corners post at the middle off the plane. The front planations at its rear edge, and may be able to be pulling back a piece off whalebone fastened at its center, which is stacked to the top of the frame. The rudder turns on a triangular frame attacked to the top of the rear plane. A string passes through their round off the rudder to the rear edge of the plane, forming a triangle, which makes it possible to adjust the rudder plane and fix it rigidly in position. After you have built on models, you will find yourself confronted by a wildering number of schemes for constructing new forms. It will be found a very simple matter to stiff wire for many parts of your model instead of wood or reed. In building rounded planes, the wire will be convenience. The wire may be attached to wooden frame by embedding it in thread and binding it fast. And by the way, you can get a surprising effect by painting your wooden frame with silver paint, as the Wrights do. To all 66, building the motor appearance, you will have an aluminium frame. An aeroplane tobe considered ship shape must be even more perfect in right tail than the finest racing yacht. Go over your model, scrutinize every detail. If after taking every precaution your planes do not fit like the sails off a racing yacht, cover them with Athens solution off paraffin. On hardening, this will hold the material perfectly smooth, so that the planes will offer a perfect lifting surface. Mature aeronaut must be prepared for disappointments. An airplane is sewn off the crankiest crafts in the world time and age. It may twist and turn, plunge in and out, up and down, apparently without the least excuse. There is always, however, a good reason somewhere for its behavior. As you learn its ways, which after all are very simple, the flights will belong are swiftier and steadier. There is a toy in the world which so quickly repays one for patience and perseverance. 67. After pine points of construction, a great many experiments have been made to find whether the flater curved wings give Thebes support, and how sharply that curve should be drawn. The wings of birds are curved slightly upward, and in themed, after all the experiments, it has been found that this curve is just the right one. All forms of aeroplanes will fly more swiftly and steadily if the planes be slightly bowed or flexed. After you have built your aeroplane with flat wings, it will repay you to replace them with flex planes, and you will find that the experience in building models will make this construction very simple. The lighter and more flexible materials, such as bamboo or cane, are best for the curved planes. After you have decided upon the dimensions of the wings, cut the 68 points off construction pieces 14 slightly longer than the width of your planes. These pieces may then be bent by steaming them over a kettle off boiling water and bending to desired curve. When Drithy will hold their shape remarkably well. Another planistausi flexible strip and pull ends together by a strong thread or wire until thewed is bowed to just the right curve. A corset steel or whalebone may readily be curved in the same way. It is a common mistake to curve the plane too sharply when their assistance offered to the air will be greater than that with the flat plane. A plane 2 or 3 feet in width cannot be held in shape merely by curving the end pieces. A series of ribs must be at equal distances, each having of course exactly the same upward curve. The ribs may be fastened to the sides of the planes with small brads or simply with glue or wire. The covering should then be drawn down. A very smooth covering may be made of rose paper. Cut the sheets the 69. Model aeroplanes proper sizing lay them 4 minutes between moistened cloths. Now stretch the paper carefully over the frame and glue in position. When the paper will contract and leave a smooth, taut surface like it head off edrum. Much depends upon the curve of the plane. Owing whose curve isn't a perfect arc off a circle, but which is rounded just back off the front edge and flattened at her rear, will be found to for the least resistance to the air. The best planisto study the curves in the aeroplanes or mod else and imitate them. Different models require different planes. It is a problem which each young aeronaut must work out for himself. The question offered as or guiding planes is very important. It is too much to expect often the best model that it will fly in an unswerving line. And a simple vertical plane which may be turned from side to side and held in position will act as a rudder. There is great difference of opinion as to the proper sizing position. 70. Page 87. Page 88. Fine points of construction of these guiding surfaces. It is argued by some aviators that the rudder should be placed above the plane, where the air is undisturbed. while others believe that partial vacuum created above the wings in flight makes the propeller ineffective. Still others argue that a rudder placed back of the planes affords a leverage and is therefore more effective, to a rudder in each position. It is impossible to lay down a law for all models. Larger models should be equipped with twin propellers. In building these, the greatest care should be taken to have them exactly the same size, weight, and pitch. Twin propellers should, as a rule, be placed at the front of the machine, that is, they should pull and not push the planes. If by any accident the motor of one should fail, the second propeller will continue to keep the aeroplane afloat and break its fall descending. With the propellers at Hestern off the little airship, the failure of one would cause the plane to pitch downward, and the remaining Pro-73 model aeroplane's propeller would drive it down to possible disaster. In winding up the twa motors, care should be taken to give both the same number of turns. The aeroplane may be launched by holding a propeller in either hand and releasing simultaneously. The double motor ensures a steadier as well as a longer flight. Always turn the propellers in opposite directions. In flying, they must spin around either toward each other or away from each other. The turn the same way they will give the model a torque which no rudder could possibly overcome. The efficiency of your motor depends more upon its length than its diameter. In constructing the motor base, especially for the larger models, arrange to have the strands of rubber bands extend the entire length of your aeroplane, and if necessary, project well forward off the front plane. Such a motor in unwinding will exert a more sustained force. The shorter strands of greater diameter will unwind 74. Fine points of construction much more quickly and of every short flights. With a little experience, you will soon learn to gauge your motor to the needs of your airship. It is, of course, absolutely necessary that the force exerted by the motor should be sufficient to keep your aeroplane in rapid motion, but it is to make it powerful. If it were possible to attach a governor to your motor, this would not matter so much. But since this is practically out of the question, the motor itself must be very nicely proportioned to the demand made up in it. You will soon be able to judge between the steady whir of a good motor and the buzz of a propeller which races. There is a distinct note for each. The motor is, at present, the great problem of the model aeroplane. The rubber bands are, at best, only a makeshift. It is practically out of action to a flight of more than 15 seconds in this way, so that the distance is limited to a little more than 100 feet. It is 75. Model aeroplanes doubtless only acquisition of time before a much more efficient form of motor will be invented. Very probably, some amateur aviator will be first toply a new means of propulsion, which would be an important achievement indeed. The simplest form of motor after the rubber bands would seem some form of metal spring, which could be wound up. Long before the days of automobiles, as we know them, wagons were built with motors off springs, and some surprising runts were obtained. The spring lends itself to many forms of construction, and is no expensive. It will be necessary to control its action in some way, however, to prevent it from racing and running down in almost no time, like the two heavy rubber motors. It might be found in esting to experiment with the spring toe found in the ordinary roller shade. The weight of the spring is not too great to be carried by a good aeroplane model, which, of course, is a great factor in their favor. 76. Page 93. Page 94. 9 points of construction. A number of experiments have been made in France to equip aeroplane models with compressed air motors. The compressed air is carried in a hollow tube in much the same position as rubber bands. Many believe that the motor problem for the toy airplane will be solved in this way. A number of interesting models have also been equipped with clockwork motors. A small movement, such as may be borrowed from some mechanical toys, will run for a minute or more. Glorious flights would be possible for models could be kept aloft safe at times as long as at present. When you feel that you thoroughly understand your model, borrow the clockwork from some old toy and make the experiment. It is possible to buy motors for model aeroplanes. The smallest of these develops 1/2 horsepower, weighs 7 pounds and will run for 15 minutes. The best covering for viewing still remains largely an open question. Al 79. Model airplanes, though your model will make successful flights with almost any kind of covering, you will find that its stability will be decreased and the flight lengthened by a little attention to thighs detail. According to the Wright brothers, the most successful covering is the which offers the greatest resistance to the air. The pressure off the air upward under the planes tends to force its way through the meshes often the finest cloth. The addition of a coat of varnish will prevent this leakage. Light parchment will also be found effective. It will be well to experiment with a variety of coverings. Every light, serviceable frame may be made for your motor base by using hollow shafts or sticks. Procure every thin, light wood, such as used for veneering, and after cutting, get carefully in strips, glue them together to form a hollow shaft about an inch square. Although the shell may be only 1/16 of an inch thick, the frame will be found strong enough for all practical purposes. A hollow frame of 80. Fine points of construction this kind will save several ounces of weight. The builder of aeroplane models will find a good friend in aluminium. It is strong enough for all purposes off-model airship, and even when used freely, adds almost nothing to it. The metal costs 90 cents a pound, but it is a light that, at his rate, it will be found very cheap material. Comparatively thick pieces may be used for braces or for angles, thus making the frame absolutely rigid. Adding beauty fraction off an ounce to it. The metal, being comparatively soft, easily worked, and simple castings may be made at little expense. Many builders of airplanes waste time and ingenuity quite unnecessarily in constructing sets of wheels for current their models. The time would be better employed in looking to airplanes. The amount of friction saved by attaching wheels, even good ones, to your model, is after all very trifling. Should Thuheels 81 model aeroplanes jam or stick, which is likely to the case with such small models, they are worse than skids, and besides, add appreciably to Thuit. A light skid is better than a clumsy wheel. If your model fails to rise from the ground, the fault is not at all likely to be the skids, butin the thrust or lifting surface. Excellent plan for guiding the flights is to square frames off soft lead wire to the front or cutting edge of your front planes. Bend a piece off wire to from 3 sides off a square, each 3 inches long, and fasten the loose ends to the plane. By bending the support down, the center of gravity may belter out a touch. If your model goes askew, you may bend one off these up and the other down until you get the desired balance. In actual practice, the soaring or floating planes seem to greater stability to the model and affect to marked degree the length off the flight. It is difficult to tell exactly why. The planescent passing 82 fine points off construction may create Andy in the air, a following wave, a sitware which tends to retard the flight, while the floating plane smooths this out. In any event, here is experiment well worth trying. After VI simple monoplane models OF the variety of airplanes, there seems to be known. Nature offers a bewildering variety of models in innumerable birds and insects, which may be accepted as successful monoplanes. These, in turn, may be copied and modified indefinitely. The science of aviation is still so young that there is ample opportunity for invention and discovery for all, and every new trial adds something to your information, and carries the science a step nearer perfection. It will be found excellent planto build, unseen for all, a strong well-proportioned motor base, and mount a powerful motor and will model lead propeller. A variety of planes may be bested out by attaching them to thighs. The motor 84. Simple monoplane models base will answer for practical monoplane forms and many biplane models as well. Such a frame should be about 3 feet in length and carry 1 or better 2 motors, placed side by side. There is as much danger in providing too much lifting surface in your aeroplane as too little. This fault is well illustrated in exceedingly clever French model, Plate. Although the model is well constructed, and appears ship-shape at first glance, nevertheless has far too much surface and will not fly well. If the depth of viewings were reduced fully on half, it would have a much better chance. The best lifting planes are those which present a broad front or entering edge, but with comparatively little depth. The successful flying machines, whether monoplanes or biplanes, use these very wide but shallow planes forward. The theory is, of course, that the air is caught for an instant beneath the plane and before it has a chance to slip off the side. Viewing has caught its very slight, supporting power 85 model aeroplanes and moved onto when in disturbed air. With this rule in mind, examine the model's front plane on some more. It will be seen that, as the air is caught under this broad surface, it will tridoscape in all directions and set up currents off air. Instantly, the broad plane loses its balance and tilts to city or the other. No waiting off the plane can overcome this. If the plane were forced through the air at a very high speed, a steady flight might be possible. It is useless to overcome this tendency to pan wobble. The planes again are badly designed. A perfectly straight front or entering edge gives the best results. A certain stability is gained by curving the front plane slightly. This will be discussed later, but there is no excuse for the semicircle described in this case. Every inch off surface skewed away from the front edge off plane directly reduces its lifting power. The arrow-like form off the rear plane does not matter because this is a stability plane. 86. Page 103. Plate I, a clever folding model. The wings are broader than need be. Simple monoplane models note a lifting plane. In this case, your plane twist the size it should be. The propeller off this model is much too small even if the size off the planes was correct. It is well placed, however, at half front off the model where it may turn in undisturbed air. The passage off these large planes, or in a plane's fourth that matter, is likely to cue up the air just as a ship churns the water in tow wake behind it and the propeller does note work effectively in these eddies. The motor seems powerful and well braced, although it might be made even longer by carrying it out the extreme rear. Several very useful ideas may be borrowed from the construction off the frame off this model. It is made entirely off metal, saw-jointed that it may be folded upinto vera compact form like an umbrella. The amateur model builder should not attempt anything so complicated. An old umbrella frame may be used with good results in building a rigid frame. Use the steel rod off the umbrella a sabbac bone and cut 89 model aeroplanes away with ribsy out not need. The others may be bent into various shapes to form the front or sides off the planes, the skids or braces. Such a construction is light and perfectly rigid. Every effective monoplane may be made by curving the front and rear edges off the forward plane, while keeping the rear or stability plane rectangular in shape. Plate 2. The curve off this model may be imitated toe advantage, as well as general proportions. Chaplanesless like Latoba deflected by air currents, than a straight entering edge, and ensures longer and steadier flights. Should you be troubled by your model twisting from side to side in flight, try curving the front edge off the forward plane. This model ISO off the Tommy and is excellent one for beginners. Build the two planes separately, making the larger one about 30 inches in width and inches in depth, and the second one 15 inches in width and inches in depth. The curved sticks may be 90. Simple monoplane models worked up using bamboo or dowel sticks, soaking them in water and fastening them in a bowed position while damp and leaving them tawdry. It may be found a good plan to heavier stick for the rear edge off the plane to gain stability. A single stick about 1/2 inch in diameter may be used for the backbone. It will be found excellent plan to attach the planes lightly to the main frame so that they may be adjusted before fixing them final in position. Place them in the position shown in the accompanying photograph and move them up and down until the flights are all that you expect, when they may be fastened for good and all. The bracing off this model is excellent and may be safely imitated. Itenables 1 to 2 up either plane and fix them rigidly in position. The propeller is very properly placed forward, although it appears to rather small. It is unnecessary to bother with an vertical rudder for this model, since the curve off the front plane ensures reasonably straight flight. Model Aeroplanes, a popular French model which may be easily imitated, consists of curved planes both front and rear. Plate 3. The curve off the plane is too complicated to be carried out in wood, but may be readily formed by bending a stiff wire to its desired shape. The front plane should be about 12 inches in width and 4 inches in depth. There should be about half this sizing off the sawmill form. The planes may be readily mounted on a small dowel stick. Small propeller and a motor a foot in length will ensure. A small semicircular fin should be set below there are planetoctus rudder. First cover the frames with a stiff paper, and after you have succeeded in adjusting it, this may be replaced by cloth. The model will not fly far or very steadily, but it is interesting to practice with. The balance off the model is open to criticism, for the center of gravity appears too far forward. The simplest oval models to build and not the least interesting. It's the small paper 92. Model aeroplane worth imitating. Page 110. Simple monoplane models monoplane. Plate 4. The planes which are slightly curved are formed off a stiff card which will hold its shape when bent into position. The semi be attached to the main stick be inserting anage into a groove in the stick and gluing in place. It is not well to construct the sem more than 6 inches in width overall. One off the simplest monoplane stock construct is formed off a broad rectangular forward plane with a fan-shaped stability plane at the rear. Plate 5. This is a French model which is said to have flown long distances, that is to say, 300 feet or more. It has several very interesting features. In the first place, the combined area of its plane is doubtless greater than that of any other model here described. The vertical rudder, which looks very ship-shape and effective, is very easy to build, and the frame illustrates several new principles. The frame or motor base may be made of heavy dowel sticks or light lath as indicated in the photograph. It will be found 95. Model aeroplanes simpler to avoid tapering the frame at rear by merely constructing a stout rectangular base with a length 2.5 times its width. The forward plane is slightly bowed or flexed. It will found a good plan to construct the frame for the base and then bow a light strip at either end against the edge. By fastening the covering of these curved strips, a smooth, curved surface may be obtained. Rear stability plane may be stretched over a fan-shaped frame off strips or lath, which is in turn fastened to the motor base. Another plan is to attach the front and rear edges off the plane. There are one being slightly longer, and stretch the covering over these, leaving the sides free as in the photograph off the accompanying model. The vertical rudder is very simple, consisting of a piece of dowel stick sunk in their off-frame tow hitch. A rectangular piece off cloth is attached, the front corner being pulled taut. The spread off the planes appears to be considerably greater than needs be. Since 96, simple monoplane models, the front plane is flexed, it may be reduced 1/3 or 1.5 in depth without reducing its lifting quality, although in this case it should be placed nearer the stability plane. This reduction would, of course, make an important saving in the weight off the craft. So large a model calls for it with propellers which will prove more effective at front rather than there are off the machine. Might be well to carry the motors further back than has been done in this model, thus gaining additional power. Since the model is expected to rise unaided from the ground, texture off the skids is very important. The design fall load in the model is excellent. The front off the frame is supported by legs consisting of inverted triangles built off dowel sticks attached to the frame. The axle connecting the two runs on small wheels, such as may be borrowed from Aero Mobile. The rear off-the-frame Rissona simple skid-made off-curved reed. These supports place the model at an angle 97. Model aeroplanes which should enable iteracy easily without loss of power. There is a great deal of satisfaction in working on so large a model. The parts may be made stronger and there is less likelihood of its getting out of order. Now turn from these broad planes to the rather slight model, plate 6, and the faults of its proportion narrates of views. The front plane is much too far back for stability. Such a model will glide fairly well, and if the motor be powerful, it will rise quickly. Ure steady horizontal flight is out of texture. The size of the plane seems perilously small, and yet if the buell-shaped and space they will prove large enough. This is just the sort of model a beginneress likely to make, and therefore serves every useful purpose in pointing a lesson. It is not without its good points. The front plane has been carefully flexed and attached to the motor frame at a good angle. An interesting experiment has also been made in carrying thieves off 98. Page 115. Page 116. Simple monoplane models front plane at rifle behind their R edge, thus making for stability. The vertical rudder above their R stability plane is well placed, although it appears rather small. The skids upon which the model rests and the proportion off the front to the rear elevation are excellent. It is a first-rate plan in building such a model to tack the front plane temporarily to the motor base and move it back and forth in the trial flights until the best spacing has been found. 101. After Roman 7 elaborating the monoplane, Itisha pricing to find how far the pure monoplane form has been developed by the builders of model aeroplanes. It is no exaggeration to say that they have car at some principles of construction even further than the builders of the large in carrying monoplanes. Since a model is so easily built and costs so little, it is of course possible to experiment with all sorts of new forms. A great many of these will doubtless prove total wrong, but some are certain to valuable discoveries. In future years, when the aeroplane has been perfected and perhaps plays an important part in commerce, sport and warfare, it will probably be possible to trace back many of its improvements to the model aeroplanes 102. Elaborating monoplane designed, built and flown by American boy Softo Day. A beautiful model of a pure monoplane form carefully elaborated is shown in plate 7. In this case, increased stability obtained by throwing out additional planes, both to the front and rear. It may appear at first glance that these stability planes are very small compared with the broad soaring plane, but they have not proved so in flight. Will be remembered that the elevating plane off the right machine is very small compared with the spread off the main wings. There is besides a great advantage in placing the stability plane well forward, since it makes it possible to build an unusually long motor base and install longer and more powerful motors. The main plane is one of the best examples of construction work to be found among all these models. It is well proportioned and the curve has been skillfully drawn. The plane is made unusually rigid by a series of supports or braces run both 103 model aeroplanes horizontally and vertically. Such a plane calls for considerable time and patience, but it will well repay the builder by long and steady flight settingers for the model. In adding gribs to large plane off this kind a convenient material may be prepared by splitting up thin wooden plates or dishes, such as by at the grocers for a penny. The strips obtained in this way may be easily glued or to thege off the plane and shaped as desired. A long, straight flight is injured for this model by equipping it with 3 vertical rudders or guiding planes. The first rudder is well placed above the front plane. The second performs a good service beneath the main plane, while the third is carriage unusual far back behind the propellers. The problem whether a rudder is more effective above or below the planes is very ingeniously solved in this case by placing them in both positions. An interesting principle is involved in placing their rudder by fixing it far behind 104. One of the simplest of aeroplanes to construct. Page 122. Elaborating monoplane, the center of gravity of the model a considerable leverage is obtained, and as small, light rudder becomes more effective in this position than a much larger plane placed forward. These rudders are built so that they may be easily turned from side to side and fixed rigidly at an angle. Still another interesting feature of this model is the design of the skids. The model is supported at an angle which enables iteracy easily. These skids are sides arranged with shock absorbers, simply constructed with elastic bands, which enable them to take up the shock on landing and thus protects the machine. This is an interesting field of experiment, and a little care in building these skids will save many a smash-up. It cannot be too often stated that the supporting power of the planes depends far more upon their shape than their size. A remarkably effective model may be made with planes, which are little more than blades, plate 8. The planes in this case are made of white wood, slightly 107. Model aeroplanes curved. The front orienting edges very sharp, while at her rear a thin strip of shellaced silk is glued, thus forming a good soaring blade. The front plane is a counterpart of the first, except that it is smaller. The Enli stability plan is a thin, knife-like strip placed vertically just before the airplane. The model is mounted on skids. It is driven by a small propeller placed far back off the center of gravity. It's probably the easiest to sit the small full models to construct, and will fly for more than 300 feet. In building this model, it will be found a good plan to bend the strips offwood for the planes by steaming them over Akettle. Allow the steam top lay on thunder or concave city off the plane. When dry, the plane will retain its shape. The front or entering edge should be trimmed away to a sharp lines and papered perfectly smooth. The front corners off the planes should be slightly rounded, while there are edges kept straight. The forward plane should be tilted slightly upward to 108. Laborating monoplane enable it rise, buta 10 angli off less than 30 degrees. The secret of the remarkable flights off this model probably lies in the smoothness of its planes and the absence of regular parts which offer a resistance to the air. An interesting field of experiment, as yet almost untouched, lies in the triangular, ornero-proud forms of airplanes. Plate 9. The theory of this model is that a triangle entering the ironed wise meet with less resistance than when presenting abroad, entering edge. The model is frankly experiment, although it has been found to have unexpected stability and flies well. Its central planes, joined at right angles, is supported by lateral stability planes radiating backward from the front of the model. The aeroplane is drawn, not pushed, through the by double propellers and is steered by an angular guiding plane at third. The planes are mounted upon a triangular frame which runs in wheels, two being set forward and on aft. The planes, 109 model aeroplanes taking advantage of the dihedral angle, seem torsed upon the which makes for stability. In actual practice, however, the planes in this particular model have been found to tunero. The question naturally arises as to the effect of reversing this model and turning the dihedral angle off the central plane. In total effect. As a matter of actual experience, the model flies almost equally well upside down. Many of the early attempts to build aeroplanes, thewings, or planes were tilted sharply upward from the center, thus forming what is known as a dihedral angle. This form served to lower the center of gravity, and it was thought made for stability. The Wright brothers found that this plan, although it lowered the center of gravity, caused it to move from side to side like a pendulum, and therefore abandoned it in favor of flat-curved wing, which have been so generally imitated. Now this model returns to the old principle of the dihedral model, but reads no. Page 127. Too large for beginners, but will make long flights. Elaborating monoplane it way. By building the model with three planes, each with the dihedral angle, the center of gravity has been lower red end. At some time, the oscillation has been greatly reduced. The narrow-prowed form of this model is also very interesting, and its principle may well be copied. Aloft the successful monoplane Salofto Day, the Blériot, Santos Dumont, Antoinette, and others are driven with their larger or soaring planes forward and their smaller stability planes interior. The day may come when these machines will be reversed. The model before us may point the way to great improvement in the building of aircraft. It is an important principle for the builder of model aeroplanes to bear in mind. In the present state of model aeroplane building, the longest flights are made with an adaptation of the monoplane forms. Excellent model is shown in plate 10. The dihedral or V-shape of the planes give us them greater supporting power than three model aeroplanes, others in the horizontal position. The stability plane beneath is particularly recommended, since it utilizes the frame already in position and owes noted to the weight of the model. The rear of this plane, which is hinged, isoscelia adjusted. The planes off this model are especially interesting. They are made of silk laid over frames of dual sticks, and each pair is held tightly together by the simple device of connecting them with elastic bands attached to clasps. The wires running to the corners of the planes are fastened to small brass rings which may be slipped over the sticks or posts in the center of the frame, which makes them very simple to adjust. It will be noticed that there are part Ofach plane swings freely and is kept in place on Libic or set steels, used as ribs which are sewn in Totha cloth. These floating or soaring blades, as thigh are sometimes called, ensure longer flights. With such a model, there is little danger of building a powerful motor. By in 114, elaborating monoplane increasing the size of thewings, and careful weighting, a surprising amount of power may be applied to such a model without rendering it unstable. This is, of course, a great advantage in such a model, since it lends itself to longer flights and the installation of comparatively heavy motors. When you find yourself with a model of this designing good working order, experiment by binding thewings or planes at middle to form anarch surface like the wings of a saddle. The flying radius of some of these models has been increased fully 50% with a simple expedient. An interesting modification of this form, plate N is provided with rigid wings and is driven by a single propeller. The very simple but effective method of bracking thewings may be studied to advantage. Theskids will designed. In still another type of this general monoplane form, plate 12, The propeller is placed in front off the planes. Anthrubber motor runs below the main bar. Few heels sup. Model aeroplanes porting this model era particularly well made. Every serviceable little monoplane form may be made by making their upper plane adjustable, plates 13-14. The front plane is V-shaped and is inusu alistable for solid A model. By tilting their plane up or down, a good level flight may be obtained. The frame in this case is made off-wire. The propeller is placed well behind their plane, thus bringing the center of gravity well forward to balance thingly off the replane. The blades off the propeller are made of twisted wood, which is not overcome mended since it is like Latalos its shape. In plates 15-16 we have all thought out little monoplane which well repays study. The propeller is at forward off the lifting plane which is the larger off the wings. Their plane may be tilted up or down. The rudder, which is also adjustable, is it below it. The arrangement off skids excellent, enabling it to rise from the ground with little loss of 116. Model shown in plate V, ready for a flight. Page 134, elaborating monoplane friction. The method of flexing the front plane may will be imitated. A good working idea off the aeroplane is clearly shown by the builder off the biplane with triangular wings, plate 17. His model isn't successful and will not fly, yet it bodies several good features. The biplane form off the lifting plane is excellent in itself as we have seen in earlier models. The spacing off that waplanes is good, and the bracing off the model throughout is well planned. Triangle does not make a good soaring plane even when its broadside is made thintering edge. The triangle serves well enough, however, for the rear stability plane. The chief fault off the model is that it is much too large. The motor, although well proportionate, is much too weak to propel so large a frame. An interesting variation from the Mon type off airplanes made by varying thingle off the sides off the planes. Fig. 18. Here is all constructed model, and, with a single exception, fairly 119. Model aeroplanes well proportioned. The mistake, and itis likely to prove a serious one, isn't the size off the vertical rudders. They are well placed above the main plane, but their size is likely to defeat the purpose for which they were designed and knock the model off its course rather than keep it steady. It is a question again if off these rudders would not serve the purpose better than won't thus minimize weight and resistance. The best point off this model is the ingenious method of enlarging the surface off the planes without increasing the size off the planes or adding their weight. This is done by cutting the covering off planes at an angle and keeping the entire surface taut by bracing. It is of course very important that the cloth should be held tight without wrinkling. The plan of having thewings taper slightly outward is good. Such a model combines more lifting surface with less weight than any other model off this general group. 120. The Roman 8 building aeroplane ever yon knows, of course, that the box kite flees better than a plane surface, and I believe that the box or cellular type of airplane has a similar advantage over the monoplane. The end closed and keeps the from slipping off the edges off the plane, and makes for stability. There is a difference in the world, or rather in the air, between an actual flight and the movement off a model aeroplane. The aviator, by flexing his planes and adjusting his rudders fore and aft, may balance his craft to suit the occurrence. In the model aeroplane, the adjustment must be made before starting on scene for all. Several interesting principles are involved in the cellular or box 121. Model aeroplanes form off airplanes which will rep a study, plates 19-20. In disturbed air, which is of course the usual condition off the atmosphere, the cellular model is likely to be deflected, and since the elevating plane or planes cannot be adjusted, it will soon fall off its course. Such models are easy to construct, and any who has built a monoplane will have little difficulty with them. Note temptus made to flex the planes. Cellular type must be equipped with a lifting plane forward, which may be easily adjusted to angle and held in position. It is indispensable that the propellers placed behind the main plane. The model may be made much more effect by adding a third stability plane or a derrick thurier. It may be either vertical or horizontal and should be easily adjusted. The models illustrated herewith are of simple forms and clearly indicate the necessary framework. It will be found that the models require considerable ballast, skillfully distributed. 122. Page 139. Page 140. Building aeroplane. In building these cellular forms, select some light lath for the frame rather than dowel sticks. It will be necessary to join many off these towards the right angles, and the curved stick will be found difficult to. 4H box cut for sticks the desired width, and 8 sticks the depth off your plane. The box should be almost exactly square so that all these shorter sticks should be the same length. Now build your bix benailing and gluing these sticks together. Taking great pains to have it symmetrical. Should a single one of these sticks be too long or too short, it will throw the entire frame out of plumb and make it next to impossible to straight flight. In most of these models, the front or rear stability planes are made exactly like a larger frame only much smaller. When the frames are completed and thoroughly dry and smooth, stretch the cloth covering tightly over them by drawing it lengthwise. old way around. By using a single piece off cloth, it will be found easier. 125. Model aeroplanes topple it their and hold it right and smooth. It will be found a good plan to touch the outer edge soft the frame you are covering with glue just before covering. When the glue dries, the cloth will thus be held firmly in position. The cloth may be fastened to the outer edges by gluing or sewing. A simple but effective plan for mounting the stability plan is suggested by the models here illustrated. The frame off the motor base may be made through off the smaller frame and fastened between the two sticks. It should be left free so that it may be belted up or down and fixed in any position. If the rear stability plane is of rudder, it should of course be mounted vertically so that it may be turned to right or left. Be sure to make your frame sufficiently strong and rigid. A light frame which will vibrate when the motor turns or is shaken by the wind will be found veritable sum indeed. The cylindrical forms off planes, plate 21, carries the foregoing principles as step 126, building Aeroplane further. A surprising degree of stability is obtained by this enclosing the air and by throwing out several lateral stability planes fore and aft. The models may be constructed off heavy wire. Ordinary umbrella wire will answer the purpose and may be reliable. The planes in the accompanying model are merely suggestive. The broad planes placed forward, well above the diameter, promise well, but their wings appear unstable and small for the other surface. The forward or lifting planes again much too narrow. The cylindrical form is equipped with a double propeller, one before and the other in there are, both mounted on a bar, which forms the exact axis off the cylinder. This adjustment will give you a very pleasant surprise. The vibration and torque off the two propellers seem to equalize one another, and the thrust is much more steady than in the case of a single screw. The thrust is not only double in this way, but the gain for stability is surprising. The model should be mounted on skids to 127. Model aeroplanes assist it in rising, and to take up the force off the impact on landing. The double propeller mounted on same shaft may be used successfully in many models. Every simple monoplane form, plate 22, may be equipped in this way. If two or more planes be mounted between the propellers, an astonishing soaring quality may be had. It is an excellent plan to fasten the planes to the frame at first rubber bands, so that they may be pushed up or down readily. Adjusted and weighted to suit the conditions. There is danger in this form, however, that the plane will turn completely over in its flight, although his will have little effect upon the thrust or direction. The model is exceedingly simple to make. The propellers should not be too large, not more than with the diameter off the planes at most. Thetwo propellers must, of course, be turned in opposite directions to correct thetwisting tendency. Should you construct a motor base of 128, page 145, page 146, building Aeroplane this kind with propellers at either end, it will be found interesting to experiment by attaching planes of different shapes and sizes. It requires very little surface to keep such a monoplane afloat. Instead of the circular and elliptical plane placed lengthwise, as in the accompanying model, try the effect off larger circles and broader ellipses, placing the latter sideways. This may be varied by using small rectangular planes with the corners rounded off. Sooner or later you will hit upon a shape of plane and a spacing which will give you good, steady flights of surprising length. It has been suggested that a good motor base be built with double propellers and the various forms of planes tested out upon it. Let us go with this idea further, and now that we have had some experience in building aeroplane models, construct a quadruple motor base. That is a motor base with first strands off rubber bands and for propellers, two forward and two aft. The forward of course have very nicely balanced. That sets off propeller shift. Model aeroplanes carefully set up would tend to correct one another, as we have seen in the cylindrical and other double propellers, thus giving a very steady flight. The increased speed of such a motor would carry any good model at a much higher rate of speed than any of the present forms. There is a very simple rule to remember bird in building biplanes regarding the spacing off the planes. The distance between the superimposed planes should always be equal to off the planes themselves. Beautiful model, plate 23 isha reproduced, to show how not to space your planes. In all other respects, the model is excellent. The planes themselves are beautifully constructed and scientific curve. It is interesting to note in this case that the front and rear sets of planes would be much too far apart with they flat surfaces, but being flexed as they are, their supporting power is greatly increased. By placing them so far apart, a longer and more powerful motor may be used. The rudders, both fore and aft, are 132, yielding Aeroplane adjustable and appear very effective in shipshape. The method of tuning up the planes in this model is specially recommended. From a post, placed at the center of the planes, wires are run at the corners which holds the frame perfectly taut. For the main frame or backbone, a metal tube has been used which greatly adds to the appearance of the model. This aluminium tubing may be bought cheaply and will serve admirably for this purpose. Most popular offal models, among amateur aeronauts in America at least, is the Wright machine, plates 24-25. The opinion is ventured that this is due more to the attractiveness of its lines and pride will take in its wonderful achievements, than toit sexual flying ability as a model. Most perfect of these models will rarely fly more than 100 feet. They will be found exceedingly difficult to wait and adjust so that they will maintain their course in a disturbed air current. 133. Model aeroplanes. The planes of these models are usually made separate from the motor base. The shafts off the propellers, with thoroughbore motors and skids, are built to pin a single piece. This plan has advantage of making the planes adjustable so that they may move backward or forward as desired. The model leaves the ground from a base, much the same as the lucid with the large Wright machines. Some models are even started by the propulsion off a rubber band attached to the frame, which is pulled back and released like the old-fashioned slingshot. 134. Page 151. Page 152. After Roman 9, combining monoplane and biplane forms all thou h their gular biplane form exceedingly difficult to manage in small models. There is great advantage in combining it with the monoplane forms. Plate 26. The biplane makes an excel lifting plane, and when the model combines with it a broad monoplane for stability, surprisingly long flights may be made. The model here illustrated has flown 218 feet 6 inches. Despite its size, the model is exceedingly light. It is made almost entirely off dowel sticks braced with piano wire. Still another advantage of the biplane form is friction off the supporting surface when it comes towards end. The model settles easily to the ground, in contrast to many monoplane models, which come down with 137. Model aeroplanes at dislocating shock. The skids off these model are simple and effective. In a model of this form, it is obvious libus to have the propeller drive rather than pull it. An ingenious young aeronaut has reversed the above order and placed his biplane thurier, using the monoplane for lifting. Plate 27. His model is unusually large, having a spread off her feet. The biplane square with lateral stability planes one either side. The elevating planes appear small in proportion, but they serve to keep the craft on even keel. The most striking feature of this model is its extreme lightness. Although unusually large, it weighs but 9 ounces. The frame, except for the braces, is built of reed. The planes are covered with parchment. The model is driven by rather small propellers. The position of the propellers will appear at first glance to rather low, but it must be remembered that the extreme lightness of the model brings the center of gravity very far down. 138. Page 155. Page 156. Binding forms. The model has flown more than 100 feet. The stability of the models thus combining the monoplane and biplane forms comes as a surprise. Both the models in question receive from the ground, which is more than can be said of many aeroplanes big or little, and on aloft maintain a steady horizontal flight, which is still more unusual. An interesting field of experiment is suggested by these combinations. These successful experiments have been made with perfectly flat planes. Suppose no try them out with flex planes. If the stability thus gained may be combined with the increased soaring quality off the curved plane, we may be in the way to making some remarkable flights. In the summer of 1909, a number of boys built and flew model aeroplanes in New York, when many interesting and well-constructed modes were brought out, and the longest flight was only 6 feet. Less than 1 year later, the same boys succeeded in flying their machines for 141 model aeroplanes more than 100 feet. The new models were no larger, the motors no more powerful, but the machine had come more ship-shape and efficient. It is reasonable to suppose Theta will bring a similar advance. 142. Chapter X Faults and how to mend them. You are a model, perhaps a beautiful one, finished in every part, may twist and tip about as soon as it is launched and quickly dart to the ground. The fault is likely to be the propeller, being too large for the sizing weight off machine. This may be remedied by adding gawe to the front off the machine by wiring on another piece off metal. Should this fail to steady the aeroplane, the propeller must be cut down. When your propeller is too small, the machine will not rise from the ground, or, if launched in the air, will quickly flutter towards. If the model on leaving your hand with the propeller in full motion fails to keep its position from the very start, the blade should be made larger. Model aeroplanes there is now investing time and patience over the machine asitis. Many engineer, with mistaken zeal, constructs a powerful motor. The power in this case turns the propeller too swiftly for it to grasp the air. It merely bores a hole in the air and exerts little propelling force. An ordinary motor, when wound up in 150 turns, should take about 10 seconds, perhaps at rifle longer, town wind. It is a good plan to time it before chancing a flight. At Brasingas another frequent source of trouble. The planes should be absolutely rigid. Test your model by winding up your motor and letting it run down while keeping the aeroplane suspended by holding it loosely on a hand. If the motor racks the machine, that is, if the little ship is a flutter and the planes tremble visibly, the entire frame needs tuning up. It is impossible for an aeroplane to hold its course if the planes are in the least wobbly. The braces should be 144 volts taut. A loose string or wire incidentally offers as much resistance to the wooden post. The flight off your model aeroplane should be horizontal, with little or no wave motion. Your craft at first may rise to considerable height, say 15 or 20 feet, then plunge downward, right itself, and again ascend, and repeat this rather violent wave motion until it strikes the ground. To overcome this, look careful at thingle or lift off your front plane or planes and theating. The explanation is very simple. As aeroplane soars upward, the air is compressed beneath the planes, and this continues until the surface balances, tilts forward, and the downward flight commences. Your planes should be so inclined that the center off air pressure comes about 1/3 off the distance back from the front edge. The center off gravity off each plane, however, should come slightly in front off the center off pressure. After all, the bis planistop proceed by the rule 145. Model aeroplanes off them, and tilt your planes little be little, and adorlisten the weight in on place or on author, until the flight is horizontal and stable. If your aeroplane does not rise from the ground, but Morella slides along, the trouble is like little bin your lifting plane. Tilt it a trifling triagon. The simplest way to doth is to make the front skids higher than those at Hebeck. If the front skids are too high, the plane will shoot Upin Theoran come down within a few feet. Most carefully constructed model is like Litagorian Thearly flights. The propeller seems toxert atwist ordor, a citascal which sends it either right or left, or up down, even in a perfectly undisturbed atmosphere. It is assumed that your model is symmetrical. An aeroplane not properly balanced, which is larger on an side than the other, or in which the motor is no exactly centered, cannot, of course, be expected tougly straight. However, to be on the safe side. 146. Alts goal over the machine again. Measure its planes toseth at the propeller is in the center. Hold it up in front off your eye to beam, and test with your eye if the parts be properly balanced. If it still fleece bedly askew, flex planes by bending things up or down very slightly by tightening or loosening the wire braces running to the corners. It is some at time a little way to counteract thetipping tendency. A nut or may be wired on thege which persists in turning up. May require much more weight than you imagine. The difference should begin to show at once. Even after a model appears to work fairly well as a glider, the addition off the motor may sought change the center off gravity that it will cute up dreadfully. It will be well to leave your planes loose so that they may be shifted back and forth and it fasten them till you have tried out the motor. If you followed the plan suggested offening the plane to the central frame by crossing rubber bands over it. 147. Model aeroplanes you can easily adjust them. If the model tends to fly upward at a sharp angle, slide the front plane forward an inch, entry another flight. There is an adjustment somewhere which will give the model the steady, horizontal flight you are after. Some models will refuse to rise and swing around an abrupt circle themo, meant the motor is turned on. This may be caused by the propeller being much too small for the motor. After looking over all the photographs of the models shown in these pages, you will get an idea of the proper proportion, and will total offhand if the propeller is out of proportion. A small propeller revolving very rapidly, oracing is likely to give the model a torque, even if it be otherwise well proportioned. Don't torment this with rudder surfaces, but change your propeller or your motor, or both. When your aeroplane turns in long, even curves to city or theater. Look to your rudder surface. Turn it to side or theater, just to see how would in 148. Page 165. Page 166. Alt steering gabboat. It is, of course, obvious that it must be kept rigidly in position. If a slight turn off the rudder does not straighten out the flight, you probably need more guiding surface, and the rudder must be enlarged. If the model still continues to turn away from a straight line, tilting a sit so, try a little weight at the off the plane which rises. The commonest awful accidents to aeroplane models is the smashing up off the skidson landing. A model will frequently rise to height off 15 or 20 feet, and the shock off a fall from such a leva, tion is likely to work havoc in thunder body. There is no reason, however, why your model should not come down as lightly as a bird from theckrest off the flight wave. The model, when properly proportioned, weighted, or balanced, will settle down gradually and at pitch violently. It is these quick darts towarth which cause fewest disasters. A model should have sufficient supporting surface to break its fall when the model aeroplane's motor runs down at an irreasonable elevation. If the model aeroplane falls Alan Ahi, as soon as the motor slows down, it will be well to look tothus and perhaps increase the size of your planes. A sage and iral rule, the biplanes or the models in which the double planes have been used, either for lifting or soaring planes, will settle down more gradually. The lateral planes, whatever their position, also lend valuable support when the critical time comes in the descent. A model is not perfect until it falls easily attained off the flight. Under perfect condition, in absolutely undisturbed air, an aeroplane may be made to come down so lightly that no bones, even the smallest, will be broken. A gust off wind, however, may ruin all your calculations and bring the aeroplane down with a dislocating shock. The skids must be designed to meet extreme conditions, fewer that can possibly fall. It has been pointed out that these skids or supports should be high enough to give 152. Page 169. Page 170. Also the propeller clearance so that the propeller blades will not touch the ground. By using a light flexible cane for the propose and bending them under, a spring may be formed which will take up shock off a violent landing. Some builders go further and rig up the skids with braces off rubber bands to increase this cushion effect. A variety of constructions are shown in the photographs of the various models. Your skids should enable your model to withstand any ordinary shock of landing. Without breakage of any kind, the life of your motor can be greatly increased by careful handling. The rubber strands are likely to borne away against the hooks at either end. The wire used for the hooks should be heavy as possible to keep it from cutting through. Be careful that the wire which comes in contact with the rubber is perfectly smooth and flawless. A little roughness or a spur on the wire will soon cut through the rubber. It is a good plan to slip a piece of rubber tubing tightly over the 155 model aeroplanes hook and loop the rubber bands off your motor over this cushion. The first break in the rubber bands is likely to come near the center off strand. A number of loose ends appear. The broken ends should be knotted neatly and the loose ends cut away. If the strands come in contact with any part of the motor base, a breaking will quickly fall low, and your strands soon become carved red with a fringe of loose ends. Be careful to you loose and sandrum them away. And steens and twisting serve to break other strands. Although the finer strands of rubber give the greater thrust, done it by them too small since they are easily broken. The length of your motor base beyond the front plane should be carefully calculated. It is very easy, of course, to run your shaft too far forward. The center of gravity is easily shifted in this way, and your model soon becomes unmanageable. An aeroplane with this fault will not rise, but merely pitches forward under the 156. Page 173. Page 174. Alts thrusts off the motor. It is almost useless to balance this beweighting the machine. The front plane should be placed further forward, and if the lifting surface does not seem sufficient, cut away the front off your motor base once for all. Add a short motor base, on the other hand, will cause your model to shoot upward at a sharp angle, and waste much valuable propelling power before it rights itself and takes a regular horizontal flight. The model aeroplane there is only on point where friction affects the flight, namely, along the propeller shaft. One can hardly be too careful in the construction of the axle. The thrust off the rubber at best is limited and this power must be exerted without loss of any kind. A faulty propeller shaft will usup a surprising amount of energy. Your rubber motor should unwind to within 1 or 2 turns. Bear in mind that on offer things is likely to be responsible for your trouble. The planes may not be properly placed on the frame, say may not be properly. Model aeroplanes flexed, they are not set at the proper angle of elevation, or your motor is at fault. Watch these points, and you will soon have your machine under perfect control. In the extremely complicated models, it is often difficult to locate the fault. Build your model so that these parts may be adjusted in a moment without taking apart. After you have built an aeroplane model, even a very simple one, the pictures of other aeroplanes will have a new meaning for you. Every new model you see will give you some new idea. A number of the most successful aeroplane models in country are shown in the accompanying photographs. Study this carefully, and you will learn more from them of practical aeroplane construction than from any amount of reading. 160. Part Roman 2, The History and Science of Aviation. Page 178. Chapter I. The first flying machines a conquest of the air was not won by a happy accident of invention. Long before men learned to fly, the science of aviation had to be created by investigation and experiment. At first with very crude attempts, a great many flying machines had to built, and many lives sacrificed in flying them. The exact nature of the invisible air currents and the action of wings and planes. Tobe learned before the delicate mechanism of the modern aeroplane was possible. Probably another great invention has required such long and patient preparation. In many ways, the aeroplane is therefore a greater achievement than the steam engine or the steamboat. When Watt turned from watching his cattle to build his 163 model aeroplane's engine, he played mechanical principles which had long been in actual use, and there were many experienced mechanics to help him. Robert Fulton, again, when Hesse engine, found the science of boat building highly developed. The aviator had no such advantage. He must first build a craft which would keep afloat in the most unstable of mediums. A motive power had to lead to suit these conditions, and that one must be so attuned that they would work perfectly together when the least slip would mean instant disaster. As well learned to realize these difficulties, we will appreciate more than ever how marvelous a creation is the modern aeroplane. Man has thought much about flying from the earliest times. The Penner has always seemed the natural highway, and flying machines were invented hundreds of years before anyone dreamed of steam engines or steamboats. The ancient Greeks long ago spun wonderful tales of the mythical Daedalus and Icarus, and 164. Page 181. Page 182. First flying machines their flight Tothason and back again. The first practical aviator seems to have been a Greek named Chitas, and we're told he invented a dove offwood-propelled biheated air. There is another ancient record of a brass fly which made a short flight, saw that we may measure Thatvan Thincients had their own ideas about heavier-than-air machines. Spheres we may judge from these quaint old records the early aviators attempted to fly with wings which they flapped about them in imitation of birds. About the year 67 A.D., during their reign of the Emperor Nero, an aviator named Simon the Magician made a public flight before a Roman crowd. According to the record, he rose into the air through Thesistance of demons, but St. Peter having offered a prayer, the tion of the demons ceased and the magi cyan was crushed in a fallon perished instantly. Themed off the count, which sounds very probable indeed, is the first aeronautical smash-up on record. 167. Model aeroplanes even in these early days interest in aeronautics appears to have been widespread. It is recorded that a British king named Baldud succeeded in flying over the city of Trinavante, Buton Fortunate Leifel, and landing on Eightpole, was instantly killed. In the 11th century, a Benedictine monk built a pair of wings mod elegupon thepo at Ovid's description of those Uzb Daedalus, which was apparently a certain model. The aviator jumped from Ahitoer against the wind, and according to the record, sailed for 125 feet when Heffelin broke both his legs. That he should have attempted to fly against Thewand, by the way, in die catasonalage off aircraft. If we may trust the rude folklore of the Middle Ages, the glider form off airship which anticipated the modern aeroplane was used with some success 1,000 years ago. An inventor named Oliver of Malmesbury built a glider and soared for 370 feet, which would be creditable record for such a craft even in our day. 168. First flying machines 100 years later, a Saracen attempted to fly in the same way and was killed by a fall. The number of men who have given their lives to the cause of aviation in all these centuries of experiment must be considerable. Meanwhile, the kite and balloon had long been in use in China. There is no reason to doubt that kites were well understood and developed practical use in time of war as early as 300 B.C. A Chinese general, Han Xin, said to have actually signaled by kites to a beleaguered city Thathuos outside the walls and expected to lend assistance. And a French mission visiting China in 1694 reported they had seen their cords off the coronation of the Emperor Fo Qin in 1306, which described the balloon ascensions that formed part of the ceremony. The 15th century was the most active period in aeronautical experiments before our own. A number of intelligent minds worked at the problem and notable progress was made, although all fell short. 169. Model aeroplanes off-flying. Even in the light of our present knowledge of aeronautics, we must admire the thorough, scientific way the aviators went about their work 5 centuries ago. Many of their discoveries have been of great assistance to our modern aviators. Had these investigators possessed our modern machinery, of which they knew little or nothing, it is very likely they would actually have flown. One of the greatest of these investigators was Leonardo da Vinci, famous as architect and engineer as well as painter and sculptor. Tobgen at beginning off the subject, had dissected the bodies of many birds and made careful, technical drawings to illustrate the theory of the action of wings. These drawings and inscriptions are still preserved, and even today repay careful study. He also calculated with great detail the amount of force which would be necessary to drive such machines. Plans were prepared for flying machines off the heavier than airform tobe driven by wings, and even screw Pro 170. Page 187. A serviceable form made of wire. First flying machines pellars, which was looking far into the future. Among these early experiments, the record of actual flight was made by Battista Dante, a brother of the great Italian poet. In 1456, Dante flew in a glider of his own construction for more than 800 feet at Perugia in Italy, and a few years later has succeeded in flying in same glider over Lake Trasimene. Glides made by the Wright brothers while perfecting their machines seldom reached this length. For several centuries, it was believed that a lifting screw, iPhone could be built, would supply enough lifting power to support a heavier than air machine. Da Vinci experimented along this line for many years and even built a number of models with paper screws. This form of flying machine is called the helicopter. The plan was then abandoned for nearly 5 centuries and revived in our own century. Their cord awful aviators and their experiments would fill many volumes. 173. Model aeroplanes. The belief that man could learn to fly by flapping wings up and down was not given up until very recently. Nearly all the early machines were built on this principle. Man can never fly as the bird's dobe cause his muscles are differently grouped. In the birds the strongest muscles, the driving power are just at hebase off the wings where they are most needed. It is amusing to find that, while Thebirds aerialways flying before our race Nunehaska set their secrets. Any attempts have been made to wrest their secrets from them by attaching dynamometers to their wings to measure the force off the muscles, but little has been learned in this way. One scientist calculated that Agus exerts 200 horsepower, while another investigator figured out that it was only off own horsepower. Many of the theories of flight have been quite as far apart. A great variety of false notions about flying had to breed, and from all these failures man slowly learned the road he must follow. Roman II developing the Aeroplane opening off the 20th century found the world well prepared for actual conquest off the air. Aviation has been developed to an exact science. It had taken centuries off failure to Dutchmen that could not fly beflapping his wings like the birds, but they was at last been done. The birds were still the models of the heavier-than-air machines, but man had at last learned to study them more intelligently. The marvelous development of modern mechanics, especially the building of flight and efficient motors, was also of great importance. The theory of aeroplane was rapidly gaining in favor. It was thought at one time that since no birds weighed more than 50 pounds, no fleeing machine heavier than this good 175 model aeroplanes ever fly. Some years ago, Hiram S. Maxim pointed out, however, that if we had built our steam engine to imitate the horse, as Wethan hoped to build flying machines like the birds, we would have built locomotives which weighed on the the weight of an elephant, which walked 5 miles an hour. The secret of flight evidently did not lie closely imitating the familiar forms of flight. So far as man was interested, it lay clearly in the soaring flights. A bird flees with extended wings at those two things. It forms an aeroplane which supports its body, much the same as Sakite, and it operates a propeller for driving this aeroplane forward. And some finally learned to fly by borrowing a single principle from the birds. It is claimed by some that the theory, and largely the form of the modern successful aeroplane, was first suggested by an English inventor, Sir George Cayley, as early as 1796. Cayley argued that a flat plane or surface, when driven through the air inclined slightly upward, would lift a 176, developing the aeroplane considerable weight. He also suggested that a tail would help toss the plane as well as steer it upward or downward. His ideas of propelling the aeroplane by screws driven by motors was also far in advance of his time, but the engines then in existence were much too heavy for the purpose and never built a model. 50 years later, when the steam engine had been highly developed, these old planes were remembered and engineers, hence and Stringfellow, actually built a flying machine on Cayley's principles. This early aeroplane was off the monoplane form, made of oiled silk stretched over a frame of bamboo. A car carried a steam engine, and presumably the passengers washing below this plane. The motive power was supplied by propellers at the rear. The aeroplane carried a fan-shaped tail with a rudder for steering it sideways, placed beneath. The model is said to have actually flown for a short distance, but proved to be unstable. From this time onward, the experiments, 177, model aeroplanes became more scientific and accurate. Reliable scientific data was accumulated, which later enabled the aviators to build practical aeroplanes. A number of interesting experiments were made shortly afterward by a scientist named Wenham to prove that the lifting power of a carrying surface might be increased by arranging small surfaces in Tirsonab of another. Wenham had watched the birds to some purpose, and decided that a single plane, large in order support ammon, would be too large to control, but that a number of small surfaces would make the bird flight possible. Wenham built and patented a machine in 1866. He never flew, but he collected a great deal of valuable information about the behavior of planes. The slow, buton-through-hole and encouraging movement toward the successful flying machine was given a serious setback in 1872 by a book written by H. von Humboldt announcing their result of his experiments. This well-known scientist, whose 178, plate Roman 14, the underbody of the monoplane shown, plate Roman 13, page 196, developing the aeroplane name carried great weight, wrote that mechanic half-light was impossible. He based his idea in the discovery that as the body increased in size, the work or power acquired to lift, it increased more rapidly than the size of the body. In other words, every large bird or flying machine could not contain muscles strong enough or machinery strong enough to enable it to fly. Here thatna bird larger than the albatross, for instance, hadver live. Therefore no fleeing machines could ever more than toys. The book was ought to scour aging that many aviators gave up their experiments and the science of aviation stood still. It may best said to have been awakened, however, by German scientist Otto Lilienthal, whose book, published in 1886, Atones attracted worldwide attention. It was this book, incidentally, which inspired the Wright brothers to begin their experiments. Lilienthal was not only a great scientist, but he worked on the principle that an ounce of actual experience was 181. Model aeroplanes worth a ton of theory. In aviation, where the weight is all important, this saving was naturally of the greatest importance. Lilienthal built gliders, many off them, and Propulsion test the theories which others had Marilla talked and figured about. Finally, Hesse pain engine on a glider, but the machine turned over and was instantly killed. The scientific information he collected, however, proved off the high est value Tathos, who later actually conquered the air. Lilienthal built a hill 50 foot in height and shaped like a cone with sides, slanting at an angle off 30 degrees. Here he proved by actual tests that might fly no matter which way through in blue and thatanic surface, driven against the wind, would rise from the ground and support his weight. A great deal of scientific information was collected and tabulated as well as the exact effect of the pressure off air. He also changed the shape of the gliding surfaces, making them very long and narrow and driving them edge 182, developing the Aeroplane wise as in the first form of airplane. The aeroplane took Chapin his ends. The success of these experiments encouraged aviators in many countries to imitate him, and so great was the interest aroused that even his fatal accident in 1896 did not discourage them. The successful flying machine was no actual insight. For a time, it was believed that Hiram S. Maxim would be the first to construct a flying machine which would actually fly. He had gone about the problem in a thorough scientific manner, sparing neither time nor expense. Elaborate apparatus was first constructed like a revolving derrick, to test accurately the lifting powers of various aeroplanes of various sizes and shapes flying at different angles, as well as the propelling force, of many kinds of screws. The horizontal arm of this machine was 30 feet, 9 inches long, so that it described a circle of 200 feet in circumference. The arm was driven by an engine at high speed. The various aeroplane forms tested 185. Model aeroplanes were attached to the extreme end of this arm, and driven by propellers of various shapes and sizes, exactly as they would be in actual flight. Every part of machine, meanwhile, was so adjusted that they're adding soft the speed off the aeroplane, its lifting power, the exact force off propeller. In fact, every detail could be measured and recorded with scientific accuracy. This preliminary work proved to be of the highest value. The test showed, for instance, just what size the propeller should be for different size planes, and the exact pitch off the screw which would give the best results, the proper angle of levitation for the front plane, their assistance offered by various shaped planes, and the exact amount of power required for planes of different sizes. A delicate machine was also built totes the different kinds of fabrics used for covering the planes. The fabric was stretched over a small steel frame, mounted at a slight angle in a blast off air. The tendency of the cloth to lift or drift was then accurately measured. 186. Developing the aeroplane, the material which gave the greatest amount of lift and the least drift was used. A large aeroplane was finally built in 1893. It weighed 7,500 pounds, measured 104 feet in width, and was driven by a 360 horsepower engine. Compared with the clear-cut, ship-shaped aircraft of today, the Thisarly model appears crude and cumbersome. The main plane weighs almost square in shape, while the stability planes extended out from the sides. Asseries offer narrow planes, one above another, were carried below one either side. The mentioned Urafor driving was carried far below the main plane. Thetwo large propellers were placed in the stern. The aeroplane was hewn along a double-tracked railroad 1,800 feet in length, to gather sufficient momentum to cause it arise. Almost any schoolboy of today familiar with the aeroplane models could have told at a glance that the machine could not rise. When it was finally sent down the track at a good clip, the front wheels did it to 187. Model airplanes ally rise a trifle, but it immediately came down with a bad smash. Noten the least discouraged, Maxim at once designed a new machine. This me is urid 50 foot in width and 40 foot in length in the middle, but with the corners cut off, saw that it was sharpened both fore and aft. Thewings were made long and narrow, extending out 27 feet beyond the main plane, and large fore and aft rudders were attached. It was not even expected that the machine would fly. All that worshipped for was that it would lift somewhat, saw that its upward tendency might be accurately measured. Most successful flight of thy's model will seem a veritame affair indeed to the boys of today who are daily reading off the marvelous voyage center across sea and land. The airship was run over its track and the steam pressure run up to 329 pounds per square inch. The speed increased and the upward thrust began to fell. Finally, the front wheels off the machine actually lifted from the 188. Page 203. Page 204. Developing the aeroplane track. The rear axle rose 3 or 4 feet above its normal position. When it alighted, the delighted aeronauts found that the heels off the machine had passed over theater for a very short distance, without making any marks, showing that for a second or so the machine was to ally off the earth. It seems curious to today that this flight should have been considered remarkable. The experiments carried out by S.P. Langley, beginning in 1887 and lasting for 4 years, placed a great deal of valuable scientific data in the hands of the aviators. Thousands of tests were made with an apparatus similar to the two said be Maxim. In one class of these experiments, solid metal planes were attached tothind off their revolving arm in such a way that they were free to fall for a fixed distance. When in rapid, horizontal motion, the metal seemed topart with its weight, and the material, though 1,000 times heavier than Thier, was found to be two ally supported by it. It was proven, for 191 model aeroplanes instance, that own horsepower would support over 200 pounds weight off planes driven at a speed of 50 miles an hour. All this preliminary work, or nearly all, was necessary before a practical aeroplane could be constructed. The early aviators, although they didn't fly, at least showed what Natodo and several paid the price off their lives for this knowledge. Lilienthal had mapped out the aeroplaning theory and determined the general shape it must take. The experiments of Maxim and Langley enabled the successful aviators to calculate the size of the machine necessary to carry them and the amount of power required to drive it. Ik 2. After Roman 3, the Wright brothers OWN story Wright brothers brought to their work a genius for invention, and making free use of the results offer mere investigation and experiment. Finally succeeded in building a heavier than air machine which would actually fly. The story of their experiments and final success, which one may read in their own words, forms one of the most fascinating chapters in the history of invention. The Wright brothers' first flying machine was Aeroplane. Late in the term of 1878, fatal history, our father came into the house one evening with some object partially concealed in his hands, and before we could see what it was, had lost it into the air. Instead of falling to the floor, as we expected, it flew 193 model aeroplanes across the room till it struck the ceiling, where it fluttered for a while, and finally sank to the floor. It weighs a little toy known to scientists as a helicopter rabbit, which we, with sublime disregard for science, dubbed a bat. It weighs a light frame of cork and bamboo which formed two screws driven in opposite directions by rubber bands under torsion. Aerodicate lasted only a short time in the hands of small boys, but its memory was abiding. The interest of the brothers in aeronautics was awakened. We began building these helicopters ourselves. Their story goes on, making each one larger than that preceding. But to your astonishment, we found that the larger the bet the less it flew. We did not know that a machine having only twice the linear dimensions of an author would require 8 times the power. We finally became discouraged and returned to kite flying, a sport to which we had devoted so much attention that we were regarded as experts. But as we became older, we had to give up this 194. Page 209, page 210. You Wright brothers' story, fascinating sport, a son becoming tallboy's offerage. The Wrights didn't begin their experiments until the summer of 1896. They first prepared themselves thoroughly by reading the literature on aeronautics, making themselves familiar with their salts awful the experimental work of aviators Langley, Chanute, Mouillat, and others. The Wrights soon decided that the first thing Tobe solved was to build aeroplanes which would fly anthat. Till this was solved, it was foolish to waste time building delicate and costly machinery to operate them. They took up the problems off the glider and sought by actual tests what many scientists had been theorizing about 4 years. They soon discarded the various forms of gliders, the newest for experiments. The tests which led up to adopting the famous Wright model, the basis for all heavier than air machines today, occupied very little time. The story of this marvelous discovery, which will rank with 197 model aeroplanes that of Robert Fulton or Watt, is best told in their own words, which are somewhat abbreviated. The balancing off a flare may seem at first thought to be a simple matter. Say the Wrights, almost every experimenter had found in this the point he could not satisfactorily master. Many different methods were tried. Some experimenters placed the center of gravity far below the wings in the belief that the wings would naturally seek to remain at the lowest point. A more satisfactory system, especially for lateral balance, was that of arranging the wings in the shape of a broad V-form at a hedral angle, with the center low and the tips elevated. In theory, this was an automatic action, but in practice it had 2 serious defects. First, it ended to keep the machine oscillating, and second, its usefulness was restricted to calm air. Notwithstanding the known limitations of this principle, it had been embodied in almost every prominent flying machine which had been built. 198. You Wright brothers' story, where the conclusion that such machines might be of interest from a scientific point of view, but could be of no value in a practical way. We, therefore, resolved to try a fundamentally different principle. We would arrange the flyer so that it would not end to right itself. We would make it as centered as possible to the effects of change of direction or speed, and thus reduce the effects of wind gusts to a minimum. We would dot the synth fore and aft stability by giving the aeroplanes a peculiar shape, and in the lateral balance, by arching the surfaces from tip to tip, just the reverse of what our predecessors had done. Then by some suitable contrivance, actuated by the operator, forces should be brought in top late or gulati balance. Lilienthal and Chanute had guided and balanced their machines by shifting the weight off the operator's body. But this method seemed Towsing-capable Sion tome at large conditions, because the weight moved at the distance of 199. Model aeroplanes' possible motion were limited, while the disturbing forces steadily increased, both with wing area and wind velocity. In order Tomet then needs off large machines, we wish to employ some system whereby the operator could vary at will the inclination off different parts off the wings, and this obtained from thew and forces to restore the balance which wind itself had disturbed. This could easily be done by using wings capable of being warped. Adjustable surfaces in shape off-rudders. A happy device was discovered whereby the surfaces could be so warped that aeroplanes could be presented on the right and left sides at different angles to the wind. This, with an adjustable horizontal front rudder, formed the main features of our first glider. We began our first active experiments at Hecklo's off-thighs period in October 1900 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Our machine was designed to flown as a kite, with Ammon on board in winds of 200. Wright brothers' story from 15 to 20 miles an hour. But upon trial, it was found that much stronger winds were required to lift it. Suitable winds not being plentiful, we found it necessary, in order to the new balancing system, to fly the machine a sakite without Ammon on board, operating the levers through cords from the ground. This didn't give the practice anticipated, but it inspired confidence in the new system off balance. The machine of 1901 was built with the shape off surface used by Lilienthal, curved from front to rear, with a slight curvature of off its chord. But to make doubly sure that it would have sufficient lifting capacity when flown a sakite in 15 or 20 mile winds, we increased theory from 165 square feet, used in 1900, to 308 square feet, a size much larger than Lilienthal, Chanute, or Pilcher had deemed safe. Upon trial, however, the lifting capacity again fell short of calculation, so that the idea of securing practice while flying gasakite had to be abandoned. Mr. 203. Model aeroplanes Chanute, how witnessed the experiments, told us that the trouble wasn't due to poor construction of the machine. We soundly own author explanation that tables off air pressure engine rule use were incorrect. With then turned tall gliding coasting downhill in the lime thought off getting the desired practice in balancing the machine. After a few minutes practice, we were able to make glides off 300 feet, and in a few days were safely operating in 27-mile winds. In these experiments, we met with several unexpected phenomena. We found that, contrary to the teachings of the books, the center of pressure on a curved surface traveled backward when the surface was inclined, at small angles, more and more edgewise to the wind. We also discovered that in free flight, when thewing on city off the machine was presented to the wind at a greater angle than the other side, thewing with the greater angle descended, and the machine turned 200. Wright brothers' story in a direction just the reverse of what we were led to expect when flying Thema China sakite. The larger angle gave more resistance to forward motion and reduced the speed of thewing on that side. The decrease in speed more than counterbalanced the effect of the larger angle. The addition of a fixed vertical vane in there increased the trouble and made the machine absolutely dangerous. It was some time before aeromedy was discovered. This consisted of movable rudders working in conjunction with the twisting off thewings. The experiments of 1901 were far from encouraging. Wesathat calculations upon which all flying machines had been based were unreliable, and that all were simply groping in the dark. Having set out with absolute faith in the existing scientific data, we were driven to doubt one thing after another, till finally, after Warrior's oath experiment, we cast it all aside, and decided totally entirely upon our own investigations. Truth and error 205. Model aeroplanes were everywhere silently mixed as Tobin distinguishable. Nevertheless, the time expended in preliminary study of books wasn't misspent. Fourth, it gave us a good general understanding of the subject, and enabled use at the outset to avoid effort in many directions in which results would have been hopeless. To work intelligently, one needs to know the effects of a multitude of variations that would be incorporated in the surfaces of flying machines. Pre-shores on squares are different from those on rectangles, circles, triangles, or ellipses. Arched surfaces differ from planes, and vary among themselves according to depth of curvature. True arcs differ from parabolas, and the latter differ among themselves. Thick surfaces differ from thin, and surfaces thicker in one place than another vary in pressure when the positions of maximum thickness are different. Some surfaces are more efficient at tone angle, others at other angles. The shape of the also makes a difference. 206. Page 219. Page 220. Wright brothers' story saw that thousands of combinations are possible in so simple as sawing. We had taken aeronautics merely as a sport, where lucently entered upon the scientific side of it. But we soon found theorics so fascinating that we were drawn into it deeper and deeper. 2 testing machines were built, which we believed would avoid theories to which the measurements of others had been subject, after making preliminary measurements on a great number of different shaped surfaces. Already in design a star bring out the underlying causes of difference noted in their pressure. Measurements were tabulated on nearly 50 off these atoll angles from 0 to 45 degrees. In September and October 1902, nearly 1,000 flights were made, several of which covered distances off over 600 feet. Some, made against a wind of 36 miles an hour, gave proof of the effectiveness of the device's fore-control. With this machine, the autumn of 1903, we made a number of flights in which we 209 model aeroplanes remained in the air for over a minute, after soaring for a considerable time in one spot, without any descent at all. Lit Tilu under Thatorun scientific assistant should think the enlithing needed tokep it indefinitely theor would be coat off feathers to make it light. With accurate data for making calculations and a system off-balance effective in winds as well as in calms, we were in a position, we thought, to build a successful power flyer. First designs proved for a total weight of 600 pounds, including the operator and an 8-horsepower motor. But upon completion, the motor gave more power than had been estimated, and this allowed 150 pounds to be needed for strengthening thewings and other parts. It was not till several months had passed, and every phase of the problem had been thrashed over and over, that various reactions began to untangle themselves. When once a clear understanding had been obtained, there was no difficulty. 210. The Wright brothers' story in designing suitable propellers, with proper diameter, pitch, and area off blade, to meet their requirements off the flyer. High efficiency in a screw propeller is not dependent upon a particular or peculiar shape, and there is no such thing as a best screw. A propeller giving a high dynamic efficiency when used upon one machine may be almost worthless when used upon another. The propeller should in every case be designed to meet the particular conditions off the machine to which it is to operate. Our first propellers, built entirely from calculation, giving useful work 66% off the power expended. This was about 1/3 more than had been secured by Maxim and Langley. The first flights with the power machine were made on 7th of December 1903. The first flight lasted only 12 seconds. Flight very modest compared with that of birds, but it was, nevertheless, the first in the history of the world in which a machine carrying Ammon 211 model aeroplanes had raised itself by its own power into theater and free flight, had sailed forward on a level course without reduction of speed, and had finally landed without being wrecked. The second and third flights were a little longer, and the fourth lasted 59 seconds, covering Gaddy's tance of 853 feet over the ground against a 20-mile wind. After the last flight, the machine was carried back to compensate down in what was the Toba safe place. A few minutes later, when engaged in conversation about the flights, a sudden gust of wind struck the machine and started to turn it over. All made Arash to stop it, but we were too late. Mr. Daniels, adjunct in stature and strength, was lifted off his feet, and falling inside between Thesser faces, was shaken about like a rattle in a box as the machine rolled over and over. He finally fell out upon Thessan with nothing worse than painful bruises. But the damage to the machine caused Addy's continuance of experiments. 212, page 225, page 226. You Wright brothers' story in the spring of 1904. Through the kindness of Mr. Torrance Huffman of Dayton, Ohio, we were permitted to erect Asht and to continue experiments on what is known as Huffman Prairie at Sims Station, 8 miles east of Dayton. The new machine was heavier and stronger, but similar to the Nephlone at Kitty Hawk. When preparations had been completed, a wind off 3 or 4 miles was blowing, insufficient for starting on so short a track. But since many had come a long way to set the machine in action, an attempt was made. Towed to the other difficulty, Thingen refused to work properly. The machine, after running the length off the track, slid off the without risking the at all. Several of the newspaper men returned the next day, but were again disappointed. Thingen performed badly, and after a glide off only 60 feet, the machine came to the ground. Further trial was postponed till the motor could be put in better running condition. 215 model aeroplanes. We hadn't been flying long in 1904 before we found that the problem of equilibrium hadn't as yet been entirely solved. Sometimes, in making a circle, the machine would turn over sidewise despite anything the operator could do, although under the same conditions in ordinary flight, it could have been righted in an instant. In one flight in 1905, while Sir Kling about Ahoni Locustria to height off about 50 feet, the machine suddenly began tottering up and onwing, and took a course toward Thetri. The operator, not relishing Thady off Lindinganathorn tree, attempted to reach the ground. The left wing, however, struck Thetri at a height off an 12 feet from the ground, and carried away several branches. But the flight, which had covered a distance off 6 miles, was continued to the starting point. The causes of these troubles, too technical for explanation here, were not entirely overcome till the end of September 1905. The flights then rapidly in 216. You Wright brothers' story increased in length, till experiments were discontinued after the 5th of October. A practical flyer having been finally realized, we spent the years 1906 and 1907 in constructing new machines and in Busey Nest negotiations. It was not till May of this year, 1908, the experiments were resumed at Kill Devil Hill, North Carolina. Their sent flights were made totus the ability offer machines, tomit the requirements offer contract with the United States government to furnish a flir kappa, bli offering tumanan sufficient fuel supplies for a flight of 125 miles, with a speed of 40 miles an hour. The machine used in these tests was the with which the flights were made at Sims Station in 1905. Though several changes had been made to meet present requirements. The operator assumed a sitting position, instead of laying prone, as in 1905, and a sat was added for a passenger. A larger motor was installed, and radiators and gasoline reservoirs of larger capacity replaced those previously used. 217. Model aeroplanes let us know a short air journey with one of the Wright brothers as pilot. He describes the experience as follows. Let us fancy yourselves ready for the start. The machine is placed on a single rail track fastened to end and is securely fastened with a cable. The engine is put in motion and the propellers in the rear whir. You take your seat at the center off the machine beside the operator. He slips the cable and the shoot forward. An assistant who has been holding the machine in balance on the rail starts forward with you, but before you have gone 50 at the speed is too great for him, and a let's go. Before reaching the end off the track, the operator moves the front rudder, and the machine lifts from the rail like a kite supported by the pressure of the air underneath. The ground under you is at for step perfect blur. But as you rise, the objects become clear. At a height of 100 feet, you feel hardly an emotion at all, except for Thuin, which strikes your face. If you outed not 218, page 231, page 232. You Wright brothers' story take the precaution toughest in your hat before starting. You have probably lost it by this time. The operator moves a lever. The right wing rises and the machine swings about to the left. You make every short turn. Yet you not feel the sensation of being thrown from your seat, so often experience it in automobile and railway travel. You find yourself facing toward the point from which you started. Objects on the ground seem to moving at much higher speed, though you perceive not change at the pressure of wind in your face. You know then that you are traveling with Thuin. When you near the starting point, the operator stops the motor while still high in the air. The machine coasts down at an oblique angle to the ground, and after sliding 50 or 100 feet, comes towards. Although the machine often lands when traveling at a speed of a mile a minute, you feel no shock whatever, and cannot in fact tell the exact moment at which it first touched the ground. The motor closed B221. Model aeroplanes side yaukip most deafening roar during the whole flight, yet in your excitement, Yao did not notice it stopped. On his return from Le Mans, Mr. Wilbur Wright estimated that during a single year he had flown upwards of 3,000 miles. With the memory of these marvelous flights in his mind, had described his sensations to the present writer with enthusiasm. Flying is the greatest sport in the world, says Mr. Wilbur Wright. I can't describe the sensation. I can only define it by comparison with more familiar experiences. It is like sledding, like motoring, like sailing, but with increased exhilaration and freedom. An aeroplane flight, contrary to the general impression, is far steadier than the familiar means of locomotion. There is absolute freedom from the bouncing off automobile, the Jarrah railroad train, or thoroughling and pitching sensations off the sea. No matter how many springs or cushions may be did to the automobile. 222. You Wright brothers' story, for instance, there will always be some motion. On the other hand, the seat of an airplane is always steady. The aeroplane does not jolt over the invisible wind currents, the ruts of the ski. It cuts its way smoothly. Even suppose the plane toe gliding so, indicating an angle of 45 degrees, the seat remains fixed. There is, of course, no absolute parallel in surface travel. And since there is no roller pitch to the aeroplane, there is nowhere sickness comparable to the family IRC sickness. 223. After Roman 4 aboard the Wright's asterisk airship SCE and high aloft, the Wright aeroplane appears so graceful and fragile that its actual dimensions come as a surprise. In Thuprair it seems no larger than a swallow, but as it settles toward, the wings lengthen out to it off an ordinary street. There is some good reason for each stick and wire, and for every twist and turn of the Wright's marvelous airship. When one considers what wonderful feats this aircraft performs, its four-man mechanism seem extremely simple. It is far less complicated than in a locomotive or steamship, and thiction of its planets is far easier to explain than thessales off an ordinary going ship. When one has once gone over the fascinating little craft, a leather Aero 224, page 237, page 238, board the Wright's airship planes, which more or less resemble may be readily understood. The Wright machine was not only the first power airship to fly anchory ammon aloft, but for all its rivals, it still rides the unstable air currents more steadily than any other. The planes measure for type from tip to tip, 6.5 feet across, and they're spaced 6 feet apart. The distance between the planes is very important and was only fixed after a number of experiments. Real off-viewings or supporting surfaces is 540 feet, which is considerably more than in most airships. The machine complete, without any passenger or pilot, weighs 880 pounds, although you would imagine it much less. Thetwo propellers measure 8 feet in diameter and turn at her rate of 450 revolutions a minute. Equipped with a four-cylinder engine of from 25 to 30 horsepower, the airship has a speed of 40 miles an hour, which is often increased when traveling with the wind. The seats for the pilotantha passen 227. Model aeroplanes are placed at center at front of the lower plane, so that their feething over the front orienting edge. The passenger sits very comfortably throughout the flight. There is a back toe lean against, abrace forth feet, while the struts between the planes give you very opportunity to hold on. In some of the models, these seats are even upholstered in grade O harmonized with the silver or aluminum paint off the machine. A second and smaller biplane serves both a strutter and lifting plane, extends about 10 feet in front off the main planes. These two planes, which have a combined area of 50 square feet, may be inclined upward or downward by Dutch in Galver at Hepilot seat. The motor, radiator and petrol or fuel tank are placed on the lower plane in the center of the machine so that the balance the weight off the pilot and the passenger. The weight off the lifting planes and rudders rests on the main planes or lower deck. Most interesting feature off 228, page 241, page 242. Board the Wrights airship is, of course, the method for fixing the tips off the wings or planes to imitate the flight off the birds. Things off the large planes are made slightly flexible and may better and up or down by moving galver place convenient to the pilot's hand. Both planes are flexed or turned up or down at his time the vertical rudder moves, so that when the aeroplane turns to right or left, thewings give the machine the proper balance. It were not for this arrangement, things off the planes and turning would tend to rise, since they travel the faster, and the machine would be in danger of upsetting. Things off the planes may also be flexed separately when the machine is in straight flight, whenever it becomes necessary to balance it against a dangerous air current or a gust of wind. The pilot, it will be seen, hastily point off the great machine, as it were at his finger ends. The marvelous power placed in hands off the pilot off on off these models makes him almost equal off the birds soar 231. Model aeroplanes in gab out him. Let us suppose an accident to occur. Even should thingen stop, the skillful pilot is still master off the situation. He can actually coast down to the ground on the air with comparative safety. Mr. Orville Wright has soared up 3,000 feet and, after stopping his propeller, slid down on a thing atoll at her rate of more than 20 miles an hour, by the force of gravity alone. The right method of alighting is also borrowed from the birds. Watch any bird alight on it wig, and you will see that it always settles on the top of that wig, which is pressed straight down by its weight and never sideways. As the Wrights come down, they approach to within a few feet off the earth, but without touching they swoop up again, and finally settle down from a height off only a few feet. Considering the weight off their machine, they actually come down as slightly as a bird. While traveling at a speed of 40 miles an hour, they will skid along the ground or come tossed within 5 or 6 232. Board the Wrights airship feet, so quickly that a passenger cannot tell when Helen's. Not part off the aeroplane calls for more clever workmanship than thewings or planes. They must be soft and light that they will ride the air like thewings off a bird, and yet strong enough toss up port thewate off hundreds of pounds of machinery and off passengers. In the right model, the planes are made entirely off wood, but so ingeniously braced that they are perfectly rigid. Building golf such a wing is especially difficult, since it must be curved with scientific accuracy. In right model machines, as in all aeroplanes, the curve is upward, with the highest point off the arch near the front orienting edge. Both sides off the frame are completely covered so that they may offer the least possible amount of resistance. There is no ridge, scarcely a seam, to catch the air. A stout canvas is used for covering. Ingenuity off these clever workmen led them to lay on the cloth, with the 233 model aeroplane's thread running diagonally at an angle of 45 degrees. This plan serves to hold the frame more closely together and keeps the cloth from bagging or inkling. At first glance, the right machine appears to be made entirely off aluminum. Seen high aloft in the sunlight, it appears like some delicate jewel. The effect is due to the paint. The entire framework of the machine is made off spruce pine except the curved part off thewings, or entering edge, which isofash. The propellers are driven by chains, connected with the motor, which run in steel tubes, thus doing away with the danger of fouling by passengers or loose objects. The ignition system is operated by a Hitachian Eisenman magneto machine. The petrol used for fuel is carried in a tank placed above the engines and is supplied by gravity. The two wings are connected by a series of distance rods and wire cross stays, which keep the entire front, orienting edge, and central part off the model perfectly rigid. 234, page 247, page 248. Board the Wrights airship, although nearly all the aeroplanes, nowadays, are mounted on ordinary bicycle wheels, the Wrights prefer a simple system of skids, not unlike the runners off a sleigh. One of the great advantages of the skids is the fact that they take up the shock on landing more completely than wheels and protect the machine from many a hard bump. The airship rests on a small frame mounted onto our heels, placed tandem. This balanced on a small trolley which runs along a rail about 25 feet in length. It is started by the pull of a rope attached to a 1,500-pound weight, which drops from a derrick 15 feet in height. When everything gets ready, the temporary wheels are taken away, the rope is attacked, and finally the weight released. The machine glides swiftly down the track, and when the necessary speed has been reached, the pilot raises high-elevating planes at rifle, and ship glides gracefully upward and onward. 237. After other aeroplanes appear in the summer of 1904, the boys of Paris were greatly interested in watching a curious, giant kite in flight over the River Seine. The string off this kite was drawn by a fast motor boat, which darted along, while the kite rose high in the air. Its inventor tinkered with it, and changed its wings about until it finally flew like no other kite ever seen in France. All this was by no means mere play, however. Our man scientists watched the kite as it soared about, and a great deal of valuable information about the behavior of kites of this shape was learned. The man with the kite, who soon became famous in the world of aviation, was named Voisin. The aeroplane, which he afterwards built, modeled on this kite, was flown in many 238. Other aeroplanes appear remarkable flights by Henry Farman, de Lagrange, Paulhan, and others. Like the Wright airship, Voisin's is a biplane audible plane model. Although at first glance the Voisin and Wright aeroplanes may seem very much alike, as we look more closely we will find many points of contrast. The Voisin model has a large tailpiece consisting of two vertical planes which project far behind. These planes are believed to make its flight very steady. A single vertical rudder is placed between the rear edges of this plane. The rudders are turned by horizontal, sliding bars attached to the wheels, directly before the pilot's seat, like an automobile. The horizontal rudder in front, which corresponds to the Wright's double lifting plane, is single and is placed lower down than in the Wright model. The steadiness of the Voisin aeroplane in flight is gained without flexing the planes. A series of vertical planes connect the upper and lower wings, which 239 model aeroplanes giveth a machine much the appearance of a box kite. These walls are arranged so that the space enclosed at either end is almost square. It is believed that the arrangement of these walls keeps the air from sliding off the undersurface of horizontal planes, and thus greater lifting power is obtained. It is claimed that the model has much greater longitudinal stability than the Wright's machine. In other words, long-tail piece prevents the machine from tipping or pitching when the wind gusts come unevenly. The box-like or cellular form, it is believed, also adds to its stability. The model holds their cord for flying at the lowest speed 22.8 miles an hour. On the other hand, the Voisin model cannot, with any degree of safety, coast down on the air from great altitudes, like the Wright model. The method of starting the Voisin airship is entirely different from the Wright's. The machine is mounted on two wheels, attached to the girder body 240. Other aeroplanes appear with an arrangement of springs to take up the shock on landing. To launch the aeroplane, the propellers are started, and the machine rushes forward on its wheels until it has developed sufficient speed to send it up. It may thus rise from and do not reliable ground, and does not require the apparatus used by the Wrights. The pilot and passenger sit in much the same position as in the Wright aeroplane. The Voisin model weighs 300 pounds more than the Wright's, or 1,590 pounds. It has a supporting surface of 535 square feet and a speed, under favorable conditions, of 38 miles an hour. Another point of difference from the Wright model is the propeller, which is single and measures 7 feet 6 inches in diameter. The motor, an 8-cylinder Antoinette, Yuzu Ally gives 50 horsepower at new revolutions per minute. The Wright brothers, by the way, make their own motors, which are considered inferior to the French motors. The smallest and swiftest Ofol 241 model aeroplane's Aeroplane's Curtiss Herring model, which was invented by Americans whose names it bears. Its general form suggests Wright's machine. Thespen off the large Planes is only 29 feet or under, the depth but 4 feet 6 inches, and the spacing 4 feet 6 inches. It has a total wing surface off but 258 square feet. The weight, note including the pilot, is only about 450 pounds. When seen beside the aeroplane of ordinary size, little craft looks like a very large toy model. It has the appearance of a smart little racer, however, and its maximum speed is over 50 miles an hour. Everything has been sacrificed in the Curtiss Herring model for the sake of compactness. The forward rudder, which seems small even for such a craft, consists of two planes, one above the other, whose combined area is 24 square feet. Unlike the Wright or Voisin models, this forward rudder carries a vertical plane which makes for stability. There is no tailless in the Voisin model, and the rear, 242. Other aeroplanes appear vertical rudder consists of a horizontal plane 6 feet wide and 12 feet, 3 inches deep, and a vertical rudder below it, 2 feet deep and 3 feet 4 inches wide. The front underplanes extend out from the main frame about the same distance. The main stability planes, curiously enough, are placed inside the frame. There are woof these, one at either end off the main plane. An ingenious method has been followed to control the various planes. The pilot sits facing a wheel, like that off an automobile, which is rigged that by simply pushing it from him or pulling it back. He may lift or decline the front planes. By turning this wheel, he operates the rudder in there are, exactly as he would steer an automobile or a boat. The balancing mechanism in turn is connected with a frame which fits about the pilot's shoulders like a high-backed chair, an isoper 8 by merely leaning to one side or the other. This has the same effect of swarping the main planes. The control off 243 model aeroplane's machine becomes largely automatic. If the pilot feels that his aeroplane is tilting over a toning or the other, he merely leans to one side or the other, and without tacking his hands from the wheel before him, has the machine under perfect control. Even the motor is controlled by pedals placed under the pilot's feet. This little racer is mounted on 3 wheels, one wheel forward and two in rear about halfway between the main planes and the horizontal rudder. Original feature off this model is a foot brake which, connecting with the forward wheel, helps to slow down the machine on landing, just to see how close the brake of an automobile. Their Iceland rudder measuring 6 feet in diameter, which is unusually large considering the size of the model. The engine is mounted at Hessen tear off the space between the 2 main planes, and the propeller, which is kept in a line with it, is therefore considerably higher than in most aeroplanes. The lower plane comes very near the ground, 244, page 257, page 258. Their aeroplanes appear innocently raised by about the height of bicycle wheels. It is thought by some that this arrangement off the engine blankets the propeller, while others argue that the suction produced in this way increases the thrust off the propeller. The machine is built of Oregon spruce, the wings are covered with oiled rubber silk, and the entire mechanism is beautifully finished in every detail. The ingenuity of the designers of Aeroplane is astonishing. With so many aeroplanes field, or other in Thesky, it is surprising that they are in it more alike. The Farman biplane, for instance, follows the same general proportion as the Wright machine, but there the similarity ends. To secure equilibrium in this model, 4 small planes are hinged at the back of the 2 main planes, and these, it has been found, take the place of the flexing device used by the Wrights. The swinging planes on the lower wing are controlled by wires, while the upper 2 swing free. A single lever controls the 247 model aeroplanes Roman 4/all planes and the horizontal rudder. Farman has placed his stability planes unusually far behind the main frame. They consist of 2 fixed horizontal planes, one above the other, with a vertical rudder placed in the space between them. The front horizontal rudder for vertical steering is a single plane, mounted close to the entering edge. The vertical rudder is worked by a foot pedal. The machine is driven by a large wooden propeller, 8 feet 6 inches in diameter, at a speed of 1,300 revolutions per minute, which, it will be noticed, is unusually high. The Farman biplane is sewn off the heaviest yet constructed, weighing about 1,000 pounds without the pilot. An original plan has also been found for mounting the machine. The aeroplane rests upon a combination of skids and wheels. There are retwo sets off wheels under the front edge of the plane, while retwo skids are placed between the wheels of each pair. The motor is for 248. Other aeroplanes appear cylinder, 50 horsepower type, and drives the machine at her rate of 40 miles an hour. The largest, and by far the heaviest aeroplane is Cody biplane built by an American inventor who lives in England. It weighs nearly 1 ton, or more than 1,800 pounds, to be exact, and measures 52 feet across. The machine is balanced somewhat after the manner of the Curtiss herring model. It will horizontal planes placed at the extremities off the main planes and midway between their corners. The 2 main planes are 7 feet 6 inches wide and are placed 9 feet apart, which is considerably farther than in any other successful model. The upper plane is slightly curved toward the ends. The machine carries 2 larger horizontal planes for vertical steering, 16 feet before the entering edge of the main wings. These planes, placed side by side, have a combined area of 150 square feet and naturally exert a considerable lifting force. A small vertical rudder for Horizon 249 model aeroplanes tall steering is carried above and between these front planes. An unusually large rudder is placed well behind the machine, consisting of a vertical plane with an area of 40 square feet. All the rudders are operated by a heel in front of the pilot's seat. In the Cody aeroplane, the horizontal rudders are removed by pushing or pulling the heel, while by moving it sideways the 2 balancing planes, which control the equilibrium, are removed up and down. Most original feature of the Cody machine is the position of the propellers. They are carried in the space between the 2 main planes forward off the center. It would seem that they must draw the air from the upper planes and affect their lifting quality. The machine is mounted on 3 wheels, 2 beneath the front edge off the main plane, and the other slightly forward, which is an unusual distribution. The Cody biplane, with 770 feet of wing surface, lifts more than 1,800 pounds. It is a matter of guesswork of 250. Page 263. Page 264. Other aeroplanes appear course. Whether theminoplane, biplane, or some entirely new form of aeroplane will come into general use. Every model has its enthusiastic friends. The biplane, at present, has greater stability than the monoplane and carries greater weights for longer distances. The development of the flying machine is so rapid, however, that in 5 or 10 years the successful aeroplane models oft day may appear as screwed as doth a clumsy, lumbering old horseless carriages off of Yorton years ago. 253. Chapter VI Successful monoplanes will biplane borrows the general principles of flight from the birds. The monoplane carries use a step further and almost exactly reproduces their form and movement. Seen high aloft, with wings outspread, the monoplanes look like great eagles as, gracefully, but very noisily, they rise and fall in long, sweeping curves. The monoplane being a much lighter machine and less complicated is therefore cheaper to build than a multiplane model. Several of the successful models right the every steadily and have proven themselves capable of making long and difficult air journeys. Some aviators believe that the monoplane type, highly developed, Tobger Wilson be adopted for great com 254. Page 267. Page 268. Successful monoplanes commercial airships. Even in its present form, these mechanical birds look very ship-shape. The pilot can find a more comfortable seat among these wings than in biplane forms, and it takes little imagination to picture these ships, greatly enlarged, carrying comfortable cabins filled with air voyagers. Most successful model aeroplanes, by the way, are of the monoplane form. The first monoplane to make an extended flight was the Blériot. Its inventor had worked with Voisin in the experiments above the River Seine at Paris in 1906, and beginning with short flights often Liéfriards worked his way step by step. The machine in which he crossed the English Channel in 1909 and made several remarkable cross-country flights was Heiss's 11th model. Blériot's most successful model consists of only 2 wings curved upward, mounted on a long motor base which measures 26.5 feet in length. The body of the monoplane, 257. Model aeroplanes which is made of ash and poplar, tapers to a point in theory and is partially covered with continental fabric, similar to balloons. The front or main wing is 25.5 feet in width with a surface of 159 square feet. The rear plane measures only 6 feet in width and 3 feet in depth and ice-equipped with movable tips or horizontal rudders 2 feet square at either side. The vertical rudder for steering to right or left. Scar reed behind the frame. The planes are braced by a series of stay wires running in all directions. Unlike the biplane, the motor off the monoplane is placed in front of the wings. The blades off the propeller, which are usually broad, measure less than 7 feet from tip to tip. The pilot's seat is inside the motor frame near their rear jaw main wing, and with its high back and sides appears to be a comfortable place to sit. It has the disadvantage, however, of being directly behind the motor. To thaw a draft off air strikes the driver in the face. 258. Successful monoplanes, the pilot keeps his machine on even keel beflexing the tips off the planes, much the same as in the right model. The tips off the main plane and off that horizontal rudders are connected with a single lever, which gives the pilot perfect control off them. The horizontal rudders may be turned to steer the aeroplane up or down in the same way. The vertical rudder for turning the aeroplane from right to left, is operated by a foot lever. The Blériot monoplane weighs about 500 pounds, so that it carries about 4 pounds for every square foot off wing surface, or 13 pounds per square foot, which is from 2 to 4 times greater than is the case of any biplane. The machine is mounted on 3 wheels, 2 at Hefferentendo near there are, just for ward off the rudders. It has a speed of nearly 40 miles an hour. All the present monoplane models fall low the some general plan of placing their propellers and larger planes in front, and their horizontal rudder for vertical steer, 259. Model aeroplanes engine the rear. The idea is gaining ground, however, that it would be better if this arrangement was reversed, and the flew with what is no the tail in front. The theory of this arrangement is that if the off the lifting planes is presented to the air, they would answer the helm much better, as has been proven in biplane forms. The experiment of reversing the monoplane forms has been tried in model aeroplanes with great success. Heaviest and largest of the monoplanes at present is the Antoinette model, which is the invention of M. Levasseur. It looks like a great dragonfly and has proven itself very steady in flight. The main wings, measuring 42 feet in width, seem toe-arched unusually high from front to rear and taper rather sharply at things. Their total lifting surface is a trifle over 300 feet. In some oft Antoinette models, thewings are set in the form of a broad dihedral angle. The monoplane is driven from a seat in the body of the frame is Blériot model, 260. Page 273. Page 274. Successful monoplanes but move it slightly farther back. There are horizontal rudder is controlled by a large wheel at left off the pilot's seat, while a corresponding wheel on the right controls the small hinged wings at the outer edge of the main plane. The pilot turns his airship from right to by merely pressing 2 foot pedals connected with the vertical rudder in there are. In the later models, the dihedral angle has been abandoned and the front planes set the rise and tally. Most novel feature of the Toynet model is the form and control of their rudders and stability planes. The model carries 2 vertical rudders for turning the craft to the right or left, and a large horizontal rudder for vertical steering, extending far out behind it end of the main body. All of these rudders are triangular in shape, tapering to a point in there are. The Antoinette has proved, it is believed, that the corners off square rudders may be removed without affecting their guiding qualities, thus saving 263 model aeroplanes considerable surface and weight. It would seem on general principles that just reverse would be the case. The builder of model aeroplanes made a killer from the log of this airship. The Antoinette stability planes are placed just forward off the rudders, and they're triangular in shape, but with somewhat narrow ends pointing toward the front. 2 off these planes are carried horizon tally and on vertically, the vertical planes being above the horizontals. Chief fault off this model is that the horizontal stability plane, being perfectly flat, exerts little lifting power. The method of warping the tips off the planes, the same as in the Wright aeroplane, works well with this model and the flight's areas are rule remarkable steady. The machine lands onward in skids, carried well forward, connected with the frame by flexible joints. It is supported in bitwo wheels under the center off the planes. The Santos Dumont monoplane is, so far, the smallest and lightest monoplane 264. Successful monoplanes to make a successful flight. It is the aeronautical runabout, and although it has made no very extended air journeys, it has introduced several interesting features. Its owner has flown several miles across country in his little craft, housed it in an ordinary stable while making a call, and then, starting from the front lawn, flown home again without assistance of any kind. His machine may be counted upon to flee at her rate of about 37 miles an hour. Weighs only 245 pounds without the pilot. The main plane set at an angle south seen from the front, the wings rise from the center, but let her bend down toward the tips. The front orienting edge is also elevated tone and usually high degree, giving get the appearance of a rather flat umbrella. The pilot sits underneath this front plane just below the center. The stability off this plane is maintained by fixing thenes in the usual manner. The wires connecting with thenes off planes are carried toll over which is at 265. Model aeroplanes tacked to the pilot's back. The pilot, therefore, without using his hands, but merely by swaying his body from side to side, can warp the planes and bring his craft to an even keel. The Santos Dumont monoplane carries no regular stability plane at the rear, but depends for its support and guidance upon a small vertical and horizontal rudder at the end of its very short frame. These 2 rudders bisect one another, or in other words, half of the vertical rudder is above and half below the horizontal rudder, while half of the horizontal rudder is on a side and upon the other off the vertical rudder. They are attached to single rigid framework, so that both move a sawhole by means of a universal joint. The rudders, used for ascending and descending, are operated by a lever, while the rudders used for horizontal steering are controlled by a heel. The aeroplane is mounted onto wheels, placed at front off the frame and a vertical strut at her rear. Thus read 266, page 279, page 280, successful monoplanes versus the arrangement off the Antoinette. This adjustment works well in practice, and the Santos Dumont holds their chord for rising from the ground in the shortest distance. It thus rises in 6¼ seconds after traveling only 230 feet. The area off it swings us on the square feet, and its propeller consisting of double wooden blades measures only 6 feet 3 inches in diameter. It carries a 30 HP motor. The R.E.P. monoplane, the name being formed by the initials of its inventor, Robert S. Peltery, is an experiment along new lines. Its inventor believes that the wires and struts off the monoplane vibrating offer considerable resistance to the and seriously retard its forward movement. His monoplane has therefore been constructed practically without stays, wires, or rods. The monoplane is grace fuel in form, light and compact, although somewhat expensive at a build. The main frame of the airship is made of steel girders with a broad surface, and 269 model aeroplanes tapering to sharp edge at the bottom. It is covered completely with cloth, thus forming a vertical stability plane of considerable area. The motor and propeller are carried at front off the frame, while the pilot seat is fixed inside the frame just back off the machinery. The main planes have a span of 35 feet 6 inches. They extend from either city off the frame and taper slightly toward their outer edges. 2 large rudders are carried at her rear off the frame. The vertical rudder for horizontal steering is attached to an extension off the main frame, and the horizontal rudder projects from themed at a higher level. A fixed vertical stability plane or extends along the main frame back off the pilot seat. The warping off the plane and the control off both rudders is accomplished by levers placed convenient to the pilot's hand. The R.E.P. model, alone among the aeroplanes, is equipped with a fur blade propeller. It measures 6 feet 6 inches in diameter, and is driven at a speed of 270. Successful monoplanes 1,400 revolutions per minute. The speed of the craft is remarkable since it has flown for short distances at a rate of 47 miles an hour. Its weight, 780 pounds, is not unusual. An entirely new idea has been introduced in mounting this model. It rests upon onlet wow wheels, one at the front, the other at hind off the central frame. Wheels are also attached to the outer edges off the main plane. When at rest, the model tilts over to city or the other and rests on and off these wheels. Once the motor has been started, the machine quickly rights itself as the speed increases and runs along on wow wheels. 271. The Roman 7 aerial warfare eboys hotter in these pages may someday read off aerial battles fought high above the earth, and some may even take part in them. Airships are even included in the navies of 19 nations. There is great difference of opinion among experts whether the balloon or airplane will prove the better fighting machine. But meanwhile, aeronautical corps and regiments are being recruited, formidable navies of airships are being laid down, and special guns are being built to battle against them. The ordinary balloon has played a much more important part in actual warfare than most people realize. A balloon corps was organized in France as early as 1794, when balloons were built for off 272. Page 285. Page 286. Aerial warfare Republican armies. One of these balloons measuring 30 feet in diameter was sent up near Mayence to gain a view of the Austrian army. The balloon washed cap tied bit war ropes, and an officer in Thekar wrote his observations, waited the letters, and dropped them overboard. The Austrians were furious at his being and opened fire, but the ropes were lengthened and the balloon rose to a height of 1,300 feet, where it was out of range. Several years later, balloons were again used in battles by the French against the Austrians. Howard Songri with the new machine that they declared that nibble balloonist captured would be shot. For a long time afterward, however, this method of warfare was neglected, and even Napoleon could not see its value, and closed the aeronautical school and disbanded the corps. Thusioff the balloon was revived in America during the Civil War, and proved so valuable that a great war has since been fought without it. During the 275 model aeroplanes attack on Richmond, a number of balloons were sent up daily by the Federal Army to overlook the besieged city. From a point 8 miles away, valuable information was gained to stop the position of the troops and the earthworks. A telegraph apparatus was taken, and messages were sent directly from the clouds, almost over Richmond to Washington. In Spanish-American War in 1898, the balloon was againkled in Taos. An ascent was made before Santiago, Cuba, and the position of the various Spanish forces were observed and reported. Another was sent to El Paso, less than 2,000 feet from the Spanish trenches, and the position of the Spanish troops on San Juan Hill was discovered. The balloon was finally brought down by Spanish guns. During the siege of Paris in 1870, balloons were used successfully to escape from the city. Some 66 of them, carrying 168 passengers, succeeded in passing over the German armies. The 276 aerial warfare French army has also made good use of the balloon in Thuors in Madagascar, and several English balloon corps were engaged with the British Army during the Boer War. For ordinary military work, balloons of 3 sizes are used, a large balloon for forts, the regular war balloon, and an auxiliary for field work. The large balloon holds 500 cubic feet of gas and is on new set above fortifications. The regular field balloon is 33 feet in diameter and holds 19,000 cubic feet of gas. It is designed to carry 2 passengers to a height of 1,650 feet. The auxiliary balloon is considerably smaller, holding only 9,200 cubic feet of gas and carrying Buton Passenger. It is much easier to handle on long marches, and of course, may be filled and aloft in much less time. The balloons are usually filled from cylinders, which may be hurried across country in carts or automobiles. There is, besides, a regular field gas generator, Reed 277, model aeroplanes ill-packed Upin carried about, which will fill an ordinary balloon in from 15 to 20 minutes. To assist aerial attacks, a special armored automobile has been adopted by some European armies, carrying Gagan which may be aimed upward and at an angle. Despite its weight, Thudo Mobile will travel at her rate of 40 miles an hour. Their scent developments of the dirigible war balloon has rendered the free balloon practically obsolete. It is unlikely that it will ever again be used in actual warfare. The United States has been the first country to adopt the Aeroplane as a weapon of warfare. After the successful flights of the Wright brothers, the War Department purchased one of their aeroplanes, and several officers were instructed in driving it. Before being accepted, the Wrights were required to make a flight of 10 miles over a rough, mountainous Cound Trinar, Washington, and return without alighting. The test, which was highly successful, was witnessed by President 278. Page 291. The machine on the rails, as it appeared in 1893, Maxim's first aeroplane. Aerial warfare Tafton many representatives of the government. In the event of war, the United States government could quickly mobilize a formidable fleet of airplanes and man them with experienced aviators. The value of airplanes in warfare has been widely discussed by military experts. There was, at first, a general impression that such flights were much too uncertain to of practical value. The marvelous development of the Aeroplane, its remarkable flights over land and sea, have served to silence much of this criticism. Although an overseas invasion by a fleet of airships would seem to be danger of the very distant future, the United States government is already preparing to meet the situation. A remarkable series of tests have been made at head government proving grounds at Sandy Hook by firing at free balloons as they sailed past the fort. The balloons were sent away at various altitudes, in some cases at a considerable distance from the guns, and again directly 281 model aeroplanes above them. The difficulty in hitting such targets was found to be great. The aircraft moved so quickly that it is almost impossible to bring Agon off the ordinary mounting into position. Although their assaults off the test were closely guarded, it is known that the government was not Saudis feed with the defense of New York Harbor in the event of an aerial invasion, and special guns are being designed to repel such an attack. Military authorities look very far into the future in their preparations. One of the most interesting of these problems is that of protecting our seacoast should a fleet of aerial warships be sent against us. One of the plans suggested is to raise a series of captive balloons at regular intervals along the shore. It has been thought that some of these might be held near the earth, while others aerialoed to send to great altitude. The lookout in these signal stations could sight the approach of an hostile fleet of airships at a great distance, and by means of wireless 282 aerial warfare apparatus warn the country of approaching danger. Many military experts who have watched theft flights of airplanes have decided that little craft would also prove extremely difficult object for the enemy to bring down. Since they travel at upwards of a minute, ordinary guns, as thigh aerono mounted, could not hope to hit them except by a lucky shot. It would be like hunting wild geese with a cannon. At a height of several thousand feet, they cannot easily attain, an aeroplane might defy the most formidable batteries in the world. Should a fleet of these little craft be sent against an enemy, many of them would be certain to survive an attack, even if a should be lost. It does not seem probable that the aeroplane will carry aloft a cannon large enough to do damage, but they can drop high explosives with astonishing accuracy and would do important scout work. It represent cost of construction. A fleet of 100 aeroplanes might 283 model aeroplanes built in puting commission in the field or sky for what a single great battleship would cost. It has been shown, moreover, that Ammon can learn to operate an aeroplane in less time than it takes to learn to ride a bicycle. The Wrights instructed Lieutenant Lom to drive one of their machines in about 2 hours of actual flight. The war airplanes would call for great bravery and daring, but who can doubt that men would be found to serve their country, if need be, by facing this appalling danger. In military language, the modern airships fall into 3 classes: dreadnoughts, cruisers, and scouts. The dreadnoughts of the Arathel are just dirigible balloons such as Zeppelin flies. They will probably be used in aerial warfare in first line of battle and for overseas work. The cruisers comprise the dirigibles, such as have been brought to great perfection in France. These faster airships will rise higher than the dreadnoughts and will probably be used for guarding and scout. Page 297. Page 298. Aerial warfare work. The aeroplanes come under the head of scouts and will be used for these patch work and for attacking dirigibles. Their speed and effective radius of travel place the airship in the first rank among things of war. The value of the free or captive balloon has, of course, been clearly proven. It has been of the greatest value for general observation work in the field. It has been readily raised out of effective range of the enemy's batteries, and from this position, look down upon theft forts, cities, or encampments. It has become a signal station which might direct gunfire with absolute accuracy, and has been the only safe and reliable method for locating theppers and set-off mines and submarines. The dirigible balloon possesses the qualities of the free balloon and many more. It can attack by day or night. Its searchlights enable it to look down upon the enemy with pitiless accuracy. It may thus gain information about forts and harbors, which otherwise could not be. 287 model aeroplanes preached. The most completely mined harbor in the world has no terrors for such a visitor. The great problem in warfare of patrolling the frontier of a country against possible invasion seems to be solved by the dirigible. 2 or 3 men aboard a dirigible with a traveling radius of several hundred miles could do more effective work than several thousand men scattered along the frontier line. Or dispatch work the flying machine is expected to be indispensable in warfare. The bearer of dispatches has always played an important part in war. His work is often of the most perilous nature, and his journeys at best are slow and uncertain. The dispatch bearer driving an airship 50 miles an hour could ride high above the range of the enemy's guns. These same vehicles off air would doubtless be equipped with wireless telegraph apparatus, saw that they might send or receive messages, and the aviator might talk freely with the entire countryside, directing abattery here, silencing 288, aerial warfare there, ordering an advance or conducting a retreat with unprecedented accuracy. These aerial fleets may also carry on deadly aggressive warfare. The aversi raid will have greater terror than an ordinary invasion. A fleet of dreadnoughts dirigibles, assisted by fast cruisers off the air and many aeroplane scouts would be extremely formidable. An enemy's base line would beat the mercy of such an invasion. Within a few hours, such a fleet might destroy the enemy's stores, railroads, and its cities by dropping explosives or poisonous bombs. In several recent aeroplane flights, peace bombs have been aimed to strike a given mark, and the shots have proven surprisingly accurate. By using various instruments to determine directions, it will be possible to drop such bombs with mathematical accuracy. The bombs or missiles will be suspended by wires from beneath the airship and released by an electric current to give them a perfectly vertical direction. When dropped from 289 model aeroplanes' great altitudes, the effect of such explosions will be difficult to withstand. Our great warships, despite their steel sides, will probably have to completely modeled before they can fight with this new enemy. When an airship drops a bomb from a point directly above a forter ship, it will be absolutely out off the range of the enemy, since to shoot directly up into the air would be to fire a boomerang which would quickly return and inflict serious damage. An actual test was recently read out in England, when a 13-pound gun fired at a balloon 1,000 feet in the air. Although the gun had an effective range of 4,000 feet, and the balloon washed captive, it was not until the 17th shot had been fired that it was brought down. It has also been proven that our rifle ball will be deflected by the draft from the propeller of an aeroplane. The flying machine promises to revolutionize warfare. 290. Page 303. Page 304. After Roman 8 sports off the air, aeroplanes and a contest off airships makes excellent sport. A citosity flight by aeroplane, for instance, attracts greater crowds thank good and a procession or oil progressing the past. The aeronautical tournaments and meets already have been held from Egypt in the east to California in the west. Let an aeroplane soar higher than any has risen before, stay aloft longer, or make a record for speed or distance. And the news isn't stancable around the world. Although have gone aloft, tell us that fly in just the greatest sport in the world. The free, rapid glide we'll enjoy in skating or coasting becomes speedier and smoother in an airship, without exerting the least effort. It is the sense of rapid motion. 293. Model aeroplanes which has made the automobile so popular, and the airship improves upon the automobile, just as the automobile improved on the lumbering coaches off the past. Once aloft, the aerial passenger glides with the swallow's swiftness. Now, cried an enthusiastic Frenchwoman after her first aeroplane flight, now I understand why the birds sing. As the aeroplane is brought under better control, we will see these contests grow more and more exciting. Development of the new craft has been so rapid, we have come to expect so much from it, that the exhibition at which the world marvels today becomes the commonplace of tomorrow. The early flights off the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk failed to attract much attention. There had been some announcements of successful flying machines that many were skeptical, especially in Europe, and the world didn't realize that the great day, so long promised, was dawning. It was not till the Wrights flew 294 ports off the air in North Carolina that the world began to tackle the matter seriously. Every movement of the curious new craft was closely watched thereafter. When one of the brothers went aloft, the world knew it, and crowds stood patiently before bulletin boards in New York, London, or Sydney to count the minutes. When he succeeded in staying aloft for an hour, the waiting crowds in many widely separated cities broke into simultaneous cheers. Next came the trip to poor in other European cities, and a bit of the flights became longer and higher. The brothers made double progress, for while one was in southern Europe increasing the time aloft, the other was flying higher and higher in Germany. In these early days, no attempt was made to fly across the country. The aeroplane merrily flew around and around some large field, and the distance traversed was calculated more or less accurately. After the triumphant return of 295 model aeroplanes Wrights to America, a cross-country run was made at Fort Myer to show the government that the aeroplane was more than adoy. A flight of 20 miles was made over a rough, mountainous country in several deep valleys. The air of the villas drew the machine down with a dangerous rush, but the aviator pluckily worked his way higher and passed over it in safety. Shortly after this, during the Hudson-Fulton celebration in New York, Mr. Wilbur Wright rose from Governor's Island in New York Harbor, encircled the Statue of Liberty, and again sailed high above the river north to Grant's Tomb, and returned to the starting point. Each of these feats was, in a peculiar sense, record-breaking. Meanwhile, a flock of aviators were making ascensions in biplanes and monoplanes off many designs in France. Their first attempts to fly were made, a Sarroul, in a great field on the outskirts of Paris, where immense crowds gathered to watch them. As the aviators gained confidence in their craft, theft flights rapidly became 296. Front view off the flight off the Wright aeroplane, October 4, X05. Page 310. Ports off the year longer and higher and short cross-country flights were made. The cross-country and over-water flights quickly outdistanced those made in America, and this lead and second was kept up. There are several reasons why France, after America pointed the way, should have overtaken and in some respects outdistanced her. There have been more aviators in France. The prizes offered 4 flights of various kinds, have been 10 times more numerous and valuable in France than in any other country, and this naturally invited competition. The example of France in offering valuable prizes for long flights hasn't been followed in the United States. It should be borne in mind, again, that the level stretches off-country common in Europe, offers fewer difficulties for the pilot off the aeroplane than thorough, mountainous, or Van hilly country often encountered in America. It is possible to fly hundreds of miles in the south of France or in Italy and pass over country like a great parade ground. When a long 299 model aeroplane's distance flight is made in America, rival lingor surpassing those made abroad, it is probable that it has required far more skill andering than similar European flights. The French again excel in building light, serviceable motors suitable for airplanes, and a small part of the success of French aircraft is due to this skill. The cross-country trips were quickly extended. After several successful short flights, Henry Farman surpassed Alrec Ordsby traveling 483 miles across country in France. The great feat was no to cross the English Channel. A prize of $5,000 was offered by a London newspaper for the first Channel flight. 2 attempts were made by a young Frenchman, Hubert Latham, but both times, after sailing out for several miles over the sea, some accident befell his machine and he was thrown into the water. Undaunted by these failures, another Frenchman, Louis Blériot, started early one Sunday morning, June 25, 1909, from a point near Calais, France, and 300 ports off the year landed safely at Dover on the English side. Shortly after this, still another Frenchman, de Lesseps, flew from the French coast to England in safety. The richest off the aviation prizes, a purse of $50,000, had meanwhile been offered for a successful trip via the air machine from London to Manchester, at a distance of 171 miles. Several attempts had been made to cover this distance, but without success. It was finally won, however, under very dramatic circumstances. 2 aviators, an Englishman named White and a Frenchman named Paulhan, actually raced for the goal. The French machine got away first, but was followed by the English machine closely on his heels or should with propellers. The greater part of the race took place at night in a high wind, and in the upper air lanes, intensely cold weather. Paulhan succeeded in flying 117 miles without coming down, rushing along through the night at top speed. With the dread Thatery sound behind him came 301 model aeroplanes from the machine off his rival. When he was forced toll for fuel, he worked with feverish haste, fearing Thatery seconds' delay might cost them the coveted prize. Several times the crowd about him, deceived by some night bird, cried, "Here comes White." As a matter of fact, White was beautiful miles behind. The fuel tank filled, Paulhan drove his machine full speed into Thesky and did not land till it had completed the journey and won the prize. There was naturally a great demand for a similar journey in America, and Thevia Torrent prize was soon found. For several years there had been a standing prize of $10,000 for the first successful flight between New York and Albany, over the Hudson River, the course taken by Robert Fulton in his famous trip steamboat in 1809. An effort was made to cover the distance by dirigible balloon without success. An attempt was made by Aeroplane on May 1910 by Glenn H. Curtiss, Thuner off the grand prize for speed 302. Ports off the year in Aviation meeting at Rhymes. Curtiss started from Albany in order to offset the air currents which drew up the river. After waiting for several days for fair weather, he finally got away early one morning and following the course off Hudson River, made the flight to Poughkeepsie, 75 miles south without mishap when Helen did for fuel. Again rising into the air, he started south, traveling with such speed. They outdistanced the special train which was following him. A difficult problem in Aviation was met in passing over the high lands arid mountainous section, through which the river cuts Addy, Tortue's channel. Curtiss rose to height off more than 1,000 feet, but the treacherous air currents drew him down and tossed him about at perilous angles. He fought his way, foot by foot, finally bringing his craft to even keel. On reaching New York, he landed in the upper section off the city for gasoline, and in Seymour rising above the Hudson River, flew swift Lido 303. Model aeroplanes the riotous clamor free whistle in the great harbor beneath him, tow safe landing at Governor's Island. The first great city to city and return aeroplane trip was made a few days later, between New York and Philadelphia. A new aspirant for these honors was Mr. Charles K. Hamilton, who had amazed everyone with his stirring driving. He was engaged to fly over the course for $10,000, offered by a New York and a Philadelphia newspaper. He carried with him letters from the governor of New York and the mayor of New York City, the governor of Pennsylvania and the mayor of Philadelphia. He also took aloft a number of peace bombs, which had dropped along the route to show how accurate might be the war airplane. The start was made early on the morning of June 13 from Governor's Island in New York Harbor. A special train was shelled in readiness to follow him. After rising to considerable altitude, Hamilton flew in great circles about the 304 ports off the island Tartrius wings, and then, signaling that all was ready, darted off to the south. He quickly picked up his special train, and at a pace almost a minute, flying hundreds of feet in air, sped on to Philadelphia. It was estimated that more than 1,000,000 people had gathered along the route to cheer him. Hamilton had laid out a regular timetable before starting, and so perfect was his control off the machine. At the past town after town on time to the minute like a railroad train. The run to Philadelphia, 80 miles away, was made without a lighting and without mishap of any kind. Hamilton flew over Thea Penfield, selected Foreland Ing, circled it 3 times to show they wasn't tired in the east, and settled down a slightly as a bird. He was received by the governor of Pennsylvania and the deputy mayor of Philadelphia. Toham had delivered his messages and received similar letters in reply to bring back to New York. After a brief rest off little more than on 305 Model Aeroplanes hour, Hamilton was in Seymour and Thesky, flying across country express speed. Hess at such a pace that his special train was left far behind, and it was on running at the rate of 75 miles an hour that it finally overtook him. Hamilton drew far ahead off the train on their turn trip, which was made in much faster time. The wind was favorable, and New Ark, 80 miles, was reached at her rate of 50 miles an hour. With the goal practically in sight, Hamilton's engine began working badly. He pushed on until he found himself in absolute anger when he decided to descend. From such high altitudes, the appearance off the ground is very deceptive. Hamilton chose what appeared to be a smooth piece of green grass and dropped toy, on little discover that they had settled in a marsh. The fault in Thingen was quickly remedied, but no the ground proved too soft for him to rise. In Trinterice broke his propeller and another delay fall load, while a new propeller washerried 306 ports off the air from New York. He finally succeeded, however, in rising and completing his trip to Governor's Island, thus making the round trip in a day and winning prize. Sorapidist advance in Thenu Science, Theirach Aviation meets sets a new and more difficult standard. At first, people marveled to see an airplane rising beautiful feet from the ground, but such feats soon became commonplace. Within a few months, prizes were offered for the machine staying aloft for the longest time. The element of speed was next considered, and the Aeroplane sailed around Ares course against time. The highest altitude now became a popularist feat. The pilots soon found themselves in such complete control of their machines that they gave exhibitions offlanding by the force of gravity alone. The Aeroplane would work its way upward in great spirals, and then, shutting awful power, coast down at terrifying angles on the unsubstantial air. It is from such tests as these that there will 307 model aeroplanes gradually evolve thearships of the future, theorable engines of war, theorliners for commerce, and the light and speedy pleasure aircraft. Page 321, University of California Southern Regional Library Facility, 405, Hillgard Avenue, Los Angeles. CA 90024-1388. Returned this material to the library from which it was borrowed. Page 323. Page 324.